Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the regular committee of the whole meeting to order. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I want to first recognize that holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Sneema First Nations. Ms. Gurry, introduction on late items, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the agenda this evening, we are adding agenda item 5A, Poet Laureate reading. We're adding agenda item 5B, City of Nanaimo by-election update. For agenda item 6A, Tourism Advisory Committee Terms of Reference, we're replacing the report introducer from Tracy Lowen, Communications and Marketing Specialist, with Victor Mema, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. We're removing Jen Houtby Ferguson, Vice Chair, Tourism Advisory Committee, and we're adding a presentation from Greg Klassen, Consultant 2031. We're adding agenda item 9A, Transport Canada letter. Adding agenda item 10A, Councillor Bestwick in film. We're changing the wording of the motion, and that will be under other business during Councillor Bestwick's motion. We have some wording changes. And we're adding agenda item 12C, delegation from Chris Evans and Chris Brown.
Thank you very much. Before I go to council for any additional items, I'd like to request that we move item 13A and a presentation from Sheila Malcolmson. Change the order, bringing it forward to 5A as a courtesy. So moved. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor. Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can we have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. I'm sorry, Councillor Bennett. Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, move the minutes. Under 4A, minutes of the regular committee of the whole meeting held at May the 8th. Moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, the first item up will be Ms. Sheila Malcolmson.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate the consideration. So, I'm going to open this up. Some of you may have seen this, but it's one of the nice good news stories. We've got a little movie clip that we showed at AVICC about the removal of Vicky Lynn 2 from Ladysmith Harbour. I think your tech crew has got this. Kind of encapsulates the challenge that we're up against and tells a good news story for once. I can hardly say how happy I am to be here, to be on the verge of watching the Vicky Lynn 2 sail away, and at the same time a bunch of us are still saying, fingers crossed, you know, the big cheer will be when it leaves this harbor. I am reminded of how long we've been pushing to get this vessel gone, and how long we've been pushing to have a comprehensive coast-wide solution to the whole abandoned vessel problem. It's fantastic that Vicky Lynn 2 is going to go. It's fantastic this community kept the pressure on to make it happen, and we've got a whole lot of other boats to look after. And so my legislation that would make the Coast Guard the responsible agency, nobody would get the runaround anymore, but we also need to really look at the comprehensive product recycling, finding ways to use fiberglass, finding ways to really look after these old commercial vessels at the end of their lives, fixing vessel registration, getting a licensing place that puts that pool of money aside to deal with emergency vessels. Washington wants a good model so we can develop. And so we're really keeping the pressure on it. I believe the federal government can bring this home. I'm going to keep pushing on it in the House, but I've got real optimism because this is an East Coast problem as well that we're going to finally get this right. But please, I hope that you'll take this picture and Vicky Lynn 2 as a compliment to the tenacity and the effectiveness of this community working together. And I really hope to put pressure on for a coast-wide, nationwide solution so that other communities don't have to work as hard as ladies to get this message.
It does highlight, though, when we look out here today and see the Vicky Lynn move, how much of a problem still remains. So we must continue to keep the pressure up. And now that we don't have this really symbolic big piece, we do have to make sure that we keep up that pressure on our federal government to give us a coast-wide, coast-to-coast-to-coast, long-term and sustainable solution to derelict vessels in our community. It's absolutely important that we don't sort of take our foot off the gas when it comes to this. I know the Ladysmith Maritime Society and Rod and his team, along with Staminas First Nation and our council, will continue to keep our advocacy up on this issue, but it's absolutely critically important that we don't let up. So let's stay working together, let's keep our foot on the pedal and make sure that we come for a long-term solution that'll remove this blight from coastal communities across Canada.
It is possible when a community comes together around an important issue to make a difference. It took far too long. We won. I'll tell you what, the process that we're talking about for the federal government to get a comprehensive plan that addresses the issue up and down this coast, far coast, and north coast, and the Great Lakes. I'll buy champagne for everybody. We have a real celebration. But now we should be happy with what's been accomplished and look forward to getting the whole job done.
Mr. Speaker, Liberals have been promising action on solving the abandoned vessel problem since they first took office. Coastal communities are tired of waiting. Boats are still sinking. We need a strong system to stop oil spills on our coast. It's time that this ship sails, and it's time that the Coast Guard receives the resources and the broader mandate that it needs to do its job. When this vote, take action on solutions to protect BC's coast. All right, so now we're going to switch over to the PowerPoint, which is just about 5 slides, I think. So the legislation that I'm talking about, that I'm here tonight to look for your support, many of you at the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities got an emergency motion on the floor the final day of the conference. Thank you. Got your support there, and a number of you as members of the RDN also voted in support. But we'd love to see Nanaimo City Council's name on our list of local government builders of this bill. So we just talked about Vicky Lynn, 100-foot trawler built in the 60s. You've seen boats like this, people falling out of the commercial fishing business, hitting financial hard times, letting their investment go. In this case, thousands of liters of contaminants on board, and then what ended up being a lot of asbestos in the hull. So this it turned out in the end. Maybe we'll slip to the next slide when you're familiar with these impacts. If there's oil spill, even the smallest one, you're putting commercial fishing and aquaculture jobs at risk. Tourism impacts, cities like Nanaimo and Ladysmith that have put a lot of money into waterfront beautification, attracting tourists. You just don't want these old wreck boats in the way. And then when municipalities take it upon themselves, then their local taxpayer takes a hit. And the ability of many of our unincorporated areas and small municipalities, they just cannot. They either don't have the authority or they don't have the taxpayer base to take action, let alone the liability if they end up taking on a boat that has got these health and safety risks associated, like, for example, with asbestos in the hull. I'll jump to the next slide. So the price tag on Vicky Lynn 2 ended up being $1.2 million. An equivalent size vessel that my colleague Gord Johns, who's elected just north of here, got out of Deep Bay, Bain Sound, was $300,000. So we just couldn't anticipate. When I got Department of Fisheries and Oceans to agree after 4 years of lobbying to remove Vicky Lynn, to no idea that it would have a price tag like this. But that gives us a bit of an idea of what we're up against. Next slide, please. So our push, as described in the video, is a countrywide comprehensive look so that we don't end up inadvertently having problem vessels pushed from one jurisdiction to the next. Ladysmith observed that it was when Nanaimo Port Authority, Victoria Harbour, and Port Metro Vancouver did bylaw enforcement on vessels in their own area. That's where Ladysmith collected a lot of abandoned vessels and derelict vessels when they themselves did a partial by law enforcement pushed the problem out into Penellicut Island and Thetis Island, unincorporated areas with no ability to address. So getting ahead of the problem and doing something coastwide is vital, and that's what we've been hearing from UBCM and AVICC for 15 years now. So next slide. So my bill tabled almost a year and a half ago now, and then recently updated this spring, a year and a bit later, is in the House, up for debate in October or November this fall. Next slide, please. We did, because of the collective pressure that local governments have been putting on, and I've been trying to reinforce, we did get a big announcement from the Liberal government in November, Oceans Protection Plan, which is oil spill response, a whole bunch of pieces within it. Marine protection, but abandoned vessels is one of the pieces. We haven't got a lot of detail yet, actually, on whether they're going to propose any kind of legislative framework. Next slide, please. This was a Liberal commitment. One of their East Coast members from the Atlantic region, who's got a real abandoned vessel problem in her riding, had brought this motion to the House. It was unanimously supported, which is a big step forward. Conservatives voted against this stuff in the previous Parliament. Now they do understand that this is a need. The motion in the bill was that by April 26 action would have been taken. That didn't happen. Next slide. Following that, I updated my bill, next slide, which has, in addition to identifying Coast Guard as the responsible agency to take the first action. Right now, there's a real runaround. If it's a spill risk, it's one agency. If it's navigation, it's another. If it's on the beach, it's province. People get the runaround, and that's been one of the big problems that we've identified from the local government side. So that's still part of the same bill that Jean Crowder brought forward in the previous Parliament. What I added to it was to add the elements of the UBCM and the AVICC resolutions, which is fixing vessel registration with some of the money from that going into a pool for emergency response, modeling a vessel turn-in program around some of the very successful provincial programs around vehicle scrap-it programs. Both would give owners that want to do the right thing but can't quite get their boat to the dump, create kind of an amnesty, bring in your boat, which might also have the benefit of accumulating enough mass of this material that maybe we can harness some of the local ingenuity of recycling companies and so on. And maybe see if we can identify some markets for fiberglass especially, which is the real problem, more so than the steel-hulled boats. So that's the third piece, is support product stewardship and fiberglass recycling. And we were able to get at the very end of the provincial election a commitment by the BC NDP that if the federal government was willing to work with them on vessel registration, that they might think about taking that on if that was something that they got support from local police and local governments on, and then also to look at the scrap-in and turn-in program. So that might also be a place that we can push. So I'd love to know that along with some of the other local governments here right in our backyard, as well as those that I'm encouraging across the country to lend their support to this legislative solution, I'd love to know that I've got City of Nanaimo on record also as a local government that both recognizes that there is a problem but also is pushing for a solution. The legislation that I'm putting forward was built with the advice of local government, and I'd be very proud to stand up in the House once we reconvene in September, being able to say that along with City of Ladysmith, Parksville, RDN, and other local governments, as I visit you one by one, that City of Nanaimo has also passed a resolution of support. And I think there might be one more slide there. Yeah, other ways that you can participate. I think probably most of you as councillors are on my update list, but if not, shoot me your card and I'll make sure that I send you updates if you want to get our see our campaign across the country building momentum. Love if you haven't signed our petition already. We've got copies of the petition here. Anybody else in the audience would also love to get your names. Every time there's 25 signatures on a petition, I can stand up in the House and give a 1-minute speech about the call from Coastal Communities for a Solution. And anybody else that you think in the business world, the marine technology world, and any of the innovators out there that might help us be able to crack the nut on product stewardship, I'd love to get your advice. Well, thanks for getting us this far so far, and thanks for hearing me out tonight. I'm very open to taking any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Councilor Messer.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Really appreciate being here. You indicated how that the Coast Guard would be responsible for directing the removal. Who would be responsible for the removal?
Depends a little bit on the situation. Right now, Coast Guard, to their credit, are taking a lot of action on vessels that are at an imminent risk to sink where there might be an oil spill associated with that. They're doing it kind of off the side of their desks and without the resources. So I owe, thanks for reminding me, to give full credit for them kind of filling the gap. It isn't clearly within their area of authority, though. So, for example, what happened with Vicky Lynn and with the Silver King and the Laurier, which were both abandoned fishing vessels up in Deep Bay, the Coast Guard was the one that took the responsibility as the initial responsible agency. They found funds from what's called the Ship Source Oil Spill Pollution Fund, which was set up for quite a different purpose, but since we haven't had any major oil spills on the coast, they found a way to interpret if removing an abandoned vessel will prevent an oil spill, then their fund, the Coast Guard, could apply to their fund for some money, and then the Coast Guard finds someone that can contract. So in the case of Vicky Lynn 2, who won the contract, was a salvage company that could prove expertise with these complicated workplace safety issues, and then towed the boat, as you know, right into Nanaimo Harbor, where it was brought on land and safely disassembled and recycled. Different scenario every time, but in that case, Coast Guard and those 3 vessels that I've been involved with has been the one that received the contract and kind of did the tendering. In other cases, smaller scale, we've seen salvage companies like Saltair Marine take the work on, and they would get the assurance up front that they're going to be compensated for doing the job professionally.
Councilor Kent.
Thank you again for the work you're doing. Appreciate it. And that gives me the thing, I was wondering if the Coast Guard is responsible for more oversight role, they see it as an oversight, ocean protection oversight.
That's right. I mean, the big problem, for some of you that have been around the UBCM table for, the 15 years or so that we've been lobbying for this, is that there's been a real runaround. So depending whether hazard to navigation or a spill or just simply you're in Victoria Harbor and the tourists don't want to see these old rusted out boats, but if it's a visual problem, there's no one single agency that will say, we recognize there are a problem, we'll send out a team and assess it. So we've been ad hocing it here. Washington State, Oregon, they both have very clear areas of authority. If you think there's a problem vessel, you or your bylaw officer or your economic development officer has enough relationship with the administrator of the program, you've got some credibility built up. You say, I want someone to come out and assess this boat, I think it's a risk. That gets dealt with. Doesn't mean Coast Guard gets the bill at the end of the day, but in this scenario, if my legislation passes, it'd be one-stop shopping. You as a local government, your direct connection would be to Coast Guard, and then they would make the call about which of the many federal or provincial agencies might be the one that actually takes it into their budget and gets it out there.
Thank you very much. And follow up if I can. That's my concern starting to become freighters in the Trincomalee Channel off Gabriola, the Hanjin Shipping Company, finance around the world. The global indexes show that dry goods aren't moving as rapidly as they used to. Boats are sitting idle. And we had an oil derrick in Trincomalee a few years back, 10 years ago, and they're being fixed. There was a good economy in that. And they towed it in and worked on it. But the freighter situation, one abandoned freighter caused a lot of grief, and especially off of Gabriola. What type of work are you doing, or how does that tie into something like this? Because it's a long-term financial thing, and it's a federally regulated also. And I know from our local area, people are complaining and concerned with those freighters humming all day. And they're right off of the log boom areas off of Valdez and that, and all the boats there. Gabriola, they want to touch the major ships. And some people go on to the engine that's going or leaving boats around the world. What about that?
Yeah.
It'd make a nice holiday hotel driven on the beach, I guess you could fix it.
Big problem. Protection Island has been, at the receiving end of that light and noise pollution. Southern Gulf Islands, Plumper Sound, when I was Trust Council Chair, we heard a lot about it. Near misses where because what it ended up being the Pilotage Authority said because of climate change changing the weather patterns, what used to be a safe anchorage isn't anymore. We had 3 bulk carriers within a year and a half drag anchor, one near miss that the head of the Department of Ecology in Washington State, Dale Jensen, said if this had hit on a high tide, then you would have oiled shorelines of both sides of the border. So absolutely the risk, and of course this is right in my backyard on Cape Riola, very high level of concern from sport fishing companies and so on. That said, the framework around an abandonment or anything untoward happening from those freighters is meant to be covered by the Pilotage Authority and the federal framework that regulates commercial vessels coming in and out of our waters. That may not be the perfect framework, especially given that we've got heightened risk and bankruptcies, as you say. And anybody that wants to dig into this is a big slice of my federal agenda, locally especially. That said, it's not intended to be captured by my bill. We're talking here about the smaller scale vessels where because of economic pressures, commercial fishermen have had to let their investment in their vessels go, and especially the recreational boats where we didn't know how long fiberglass was going to last, and it turns out the end of its lifespan is right about now. Stuff's wearing out, no end product for recycling. So it's really the smaller scale vessels that I've been hearing from local governments are the things that get right into their backyard and cause them economic hardship and given that nobody else federally or provincially is answering their phones, it ends up being local government that gets the phone calls from tourist operators and the marinas that want these boats going. So different scale.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Sheila, welcome. Nice to see you again. Thanks for giving us a reminder of this. I think it's a really important and worthwhile initiative. I'm glad that the regional district has chosen to support it, and I hope that the city of Nanaimo will as well. One sort of offshoot to this that I'd like you just to comment on briefly, if you would, and that is aside from beautification and ridding us of the potential for oil spill and so on, is the idea of increasing marine salvage economy and recycling. And I see this as sort of recycling on a large marine scale. I really like the vessel turn-in aspect to your proposal. Could you just comment on those things?
It's something that we've heard from marina operators that they've heard secondhand. Someone's got an old tender or a boat associated with their sailboat. It's worn out. They want to get rid of it. They can't quite figure out how. I've also heard anecdotally, although I don't think this is a problem for RDM, I've heard in other parts of Vancouver Island that when a responsible owner tries to get their boat to the dump, they get hit with a bunch of rules. It has to be on a certain kind of trailer. You have to have a certificate that it's trained to boil on. And they just say, forget it, or else they just tell their neighbor, don't bother taking it to the dump, you'll get the runaround. So better for them, they say, to just wait for a spring tide and let it float off. At which point, then there's another consequence, which is search and rescue, or RCMP Marine Unit. If they find a boat adrift and they can't track down through vessel registration who's the owner of record, then they have to presume this is a man aboard situation, and they put their own men and women in peril by going out on, so it's got these compounding problems. So vessel turn-in, if we could make it easy for people to do the responsible thing, if that could, the same as, we just don't accept old wrecked vehicles, towed into the ditch or left on, your neighbor's field. That just doesn't happen anymore the way it used to. So I think give credit to the provincial programs that have been enacted in partnership with local governments and regional districts, and see if we can create some markets, because we just can't afford to have our landfills filled up with this stuff, even if we end up shredding it and mixing it in with asphalt for the roads. I mean, who knows what we'll do on the innovation side, but the theory that we have is creating that critical mass might actually inspire some of our remaining salvage companies on the coast to get in and find some economic benefit out of what right now is just a problem for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things for you. One is the Oil Source Pollution Fund is intended to be for oil that goes overboard from ships that are visiting our country and applying our waters. If a ship were to be at anchor, and if it were to find itself in peril, would that fund only cover the oil from the source? Or do you know if there's any provisions that that fund would also look after any salvage?
My sense is that right now, with a new administrator in place for ShipSource Oil Spill Pollution Fund, they are an independently operating body. They are doing a case-by-case situation, and now analyzing each vessel as it comes to them. They take their cues from the folks on the water, like Coast Guard. In the case of a spill, they would probably be talking with Transport Canada as well, who's regulating the big shippers. I guess the big picture is the fund, we are told, is sufficiently large that it can handle, while we're in this interim period, that we don't actually really have an abandoned vessel program in place. This has been kind of a relief valve on the financial side, but especially as Councillor Kip's point around the potential abandonment of some of these really big commercial vessels that are outside the area that would be covered by my bill, that ShipSource Oil Spill Pollution Fund may well be called on to do some, at this point, unimagined things. So I'm not pushing tapping into that fund for this recreational boat side any more than we need to, although it certainly helped us out with some problem vessels in the interim. Anybody wants to dig into this issue, they've just released an annual report and they've done some extra analysis around the abandoned vessel problems. So there's lots of information out there, and if anybody's got expertise in the area, I'd love to get your advice on how we can analyze whether they're protecting our coast in as big a way as we need.
Thank you. I've got a couple of follow-up, but one is thanks for taking up on the registration aspect of it. Few people know that if you own a certain boat, that you can sell it to somebody in the Queen Charlottes, and 10 years later you can find out that it's still registered in your name.
And that doesn't happen with vehicles, does it?
Right. You
can't get insurance for a vehicle unless you can prove ownership. We're not doing that with boats, and that's a problem.
So the other one that we've talked about, you and I have talked about, and that is cradle to grave responsibility. Particularly for some of the larger pieces of equipment that are up there, we got to get a commitment from our senior levels of government that they will be responsible cradle to grave for any piece of equipment they build. So, for example, Department of National Defense, Coast Guard, Navy, Public Works, the Laurier is an ex-fisheries patrol vessel that they just sold to somebody to use as a liveaboard. And look at the consequences of selling that boat and not being responsible for it. Larger operators, Seaspan, BC Ferries, the Queen of Sydney languishes on the beach up in Mission or Wannock area. BC Ferries simply put it up for tender and it went away, but it didn't go away. It's up there laying on its side.
Still with the BC Ferries logo.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a good PR thing for the provincial government.
The ex-Lady Grace, which was previously the Seashell Queen, sunk in Cole Harbour because BC Ferries sold it to somebody to get it off the books. We have to stop that. We have to get commitment from our senior levels of government that they will be responsible, cradle to grave, on any equipment they have, and produce legislation to the same effect.
It's very good advice, and you're right. And they should be embarrassed by those examples that you give. And if they're not cleaning up their own mess, then how much credibility does the provincial and federal government have when they're dealing with commercial owners as well?
Any other questions for Ms. Mills? Councillor Brown?
No question.
No?
Thank you, Sheila, that was great. Just can we have the recommended motion that time so that we know?
Slides back.
I think, didn't we just pass that?
Right.
Thanks.
Councillor Brown, do you want to do something with that?
Well, no, I'll move to
receive the delegation.
receive the delegation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kidd. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Now I
Thank you
would
very
make,
Thank you so much for your time and your.
I would
Thank you.
make the motion as printed.
Good. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Thornton. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Till fiberglass wall towns keep the Americans out of Mexico.
Thank you. Next item. Poet laureate reading. To be introduced by Mr. Chris Barfoot, Culture and Heritage Coordinator.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Well, when Tina Bialo began her role as Nanaimo's Poet Laureate, we had no idea how fast she would be off and running. Tina's passion for the arts and the community is not only contagious, but has the beautiful ability to attract others just like her. Already, she has been extremely busy in the community, creating partnerships, working on collaborations, and more importantly, helping the city of Nanaimo to establish very important friendships within the culture community. Tina has always spoken very highly of the City of Victoria's Poet Laureate and the fabulous work that she has been doing. It seems like a natural fit that Victoria's Poet Laureate and Tina would quickly connect. Already, Miss Bielo has been down to the City of Victoria Council alongside their Poet Laureate, Yvonne Blomer, and tonight Yvonne Blomer is here alongside Tina to read for you tonight. Yvonne Blomer, a Victoria-based poet who I just learned has some roots in Nanaimo, has published many poetry collections, with her work appearing in the Best of Canadian Poetry and English Anthology, as well as anthologies and literary journals in Canada, the UK, and even Japan. I'm honored to introduce Miss Yvonne Blomer, the City of Victoria's Poet Laureate, along with Tina Bielo, Nanaimo's newest Poet Laureate, who will each read for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. Can you hear me? I'm going to keep mine short. And Chris asked us to read something about Canada Day because it's coming up, and I have a poem that I will be reading at Canada Day. But this one I've written, and it's my family's story. It's very short. My family came from Italy in the 50s, and it's called Pier 21, Halifax, December 13th, 1959. They came for a better life. Didn't see the scar they made on those children who thought the city lights were heaven, glittering. After the long boat ride, the kids weren't sure if they were dead or still alive. Thanks. and Yvonne is from Nanaimo. She went to NDSS. And anyway, welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here on this Nanaimo territory. And thank you, Tina and Chris. So the poem I'm going to read kind of touches on the complicating factors of celebrating Canada Day during also the Year of Reconciliation. And it's a huge, for Victoria especially, they're really celebrating reconciliation and working towards Indigenous rights. And so those two things going together is complicated. So this poem is called Water and Weeds. And it starts with a little mumbling from me. When I sing, we stand on guard for thee, I want that to mean from this day forward, we stand for the first people and their rights. We stand for the natural world. And sorry, before I read, I'm putting together a collection of poems called Refugium to protect the Pacific Ocean. So it was very interesting to hear Sheila Malcolmson's presentation on rusty, dirty boats rotting in our sea, which is awful, and hopefully we can do something about that. Water and weeds. I am the woman sitting in her back garden contemplating drought and weeds. When I begin to write, I want the lines of a poem to be the small pebble that drops to the water's depths. Sometimes, instead, a black feather, weightless and floating. Sometimes a child's chalk candy dissolving. If we are happy, let it bowl us over. If we are lost, let's find the shore. Tonight, music and fireworks, a date, the many years, the immigrants, those who have come, who have stayed, those whose ancient ancestors wait in the shadows of long fallen totems, call on the brave to again be brave. I have been reading Thomas King and Virginia Woolf. I have been imagining the very words and the earth they rise from, how I too come from these places. I have been laughing, carefully teaching my son how to hang laundry on the line, cold water, clean soap, and for a stain, the sun's light to bleach. I am barefoot in my garden. I am standing in the uncertain mist of history, hoping to slow the world down. I will touch your hand, repeat your name to remember it. Language is alive in a poem, memory in a word. I am a woman standing on the shores of the great Pacific. I am reaching out my arms, ready to learn the first words of this land, holding hope as I walk my feet into the jagged tide. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to receive the delegations. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kip. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, City of Nanaimo by-election update. Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. You will recall that we have a by-election that's coming on July 1st, Saturday, and Ms. Sheila Uri, our city clerk, is going to provide you an update on our preparation and other information that we'd like to provide to members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship and Council. I want to go first next time. You don't have to follow that. So I'm just here to provide you on an update on the by-election, which, as Mr. Mema noted, it's happening on Saturday, July 8th, is the general voting day. We have 2 advanced voting days, with the first one being this Wednesday, June the 28th, from 8 to 8 at the Alliance Church, which I'll go through later, I mean. Sorry, Matt, could you go to the next slide now? So I just wanted to go over a few points, how to register, and as well as mail-in voting, as well as where to vote. So if you're not already registered to vote and on our voters list, which is available for checking either in our office from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday, or online, we have a cool database where you can punch in your name and address to see if you're on the voters list. If you're not on the voters list, you are eligible and able to register on the day of voting, either advanced voting days or general voting day. You just have to fill out a 200M form, which is the form that's available, and you can register right then and there. These are the qualifications that you need in order to register. So you must be 18 years of age or older on general voting day, a Canadian citizen, a resident of BC for the last 6 months immediately before the day of registration, a resident of or registered owner of real property in the city of Nanaimo for at least 30 days immediately before the day of registration, and not disqualified under the Local Government Act or any other enactment from voting in the in the actual by-election, and not otherwise disqualified by law. It's leftovers. So if you need to register, you just would need to bring 2 pieces of identification, at least one with a signature. Picture identification is not necessary, and the identification must prove both residency and identity. However, if you don't have 2 pieces of ID, we do have a sworn statement that you can say that you, swearing that you are who you say you are. So if you only have 1 piece of ID, that will suffice. As well, it could be anything like a debit card, credit card, anything with your signature. So it doesn't need to be a driver's license or some sort of official piece of identification. And this is some information for non-resident property electors if they need to register. So this is if you are not a resident of Nanaimo, but you own a piece of property here, you are entitled to vote. You can't vote for both. It's one or the other. So 1 person, 1 vote. So if you live in Ladysmith, Duncan, Vancouver, and you own a piece of property in Nanaimo, you can register to vote if you're not already on our non-resident property elector voters list. So you would just need written consent from the majority of property owners and proof that you are the owner of the property. So mail ballot voting. I just want to be very clear that mail ballot voting is by actual mail only and or hand delivered. It's not, there's no such thing as telephone voting or email voting. Slide. So who is permitted to vote by mail? Qualified electors may vote by mail if they have a physical disability, illness, or injury that affects their ability to vote at another voting opportunity, and they expect to be away from the voting jurisdiction. And again, the dates are wrong, I'm sorry. They expect to be away on July the 8th and or June 28th and July 5th. And can we just go to the next slide so that no mistakes there? And here's where you can vote. So just back to mail ballot, but you don't have to go back to the slide with all the errors. If you do need to do a mail-in ballot, you can come and fill out an application to vote by mail. You can actually vote right in our office and or ensure that you have that mail ballot delivered to City Hall either by mail or by hand before 4:30 p.m. on July the 7th. Or if you have somebody deliver it for you on actual voting day, July the 8th, it comes to this building here. This is a voting location on July the 8th, and it has to be handed into this location. And up here we have a map of the locations that are available for voting on July the 8th. And note the Nanaimo Alliance Church, which is kind of in the middle of the map. That's the advanced voting location for June 28th and July the 5th. The other locations, including Nanaimo Alliance Church, are where you can vote on July the 8th from 8 to 8, and Protection Island is open from 10 to 6, that voting location. This map is available on our website, and for those that don't have the website, they are welcome. We can email this to them, or they could come pick it up at our office, or we could mail it to them in the mail if they would like a picture of our map. And the next. And then this is just all of the actual names and addresses as well available. We could email it or mail it out to you. And it's in our official notice of election by voting, which is in the news bulletin. It was running a couple weeks in a row, and I think there will be a reminder in the bulletin this week, if not next week, which has all of the locations and the addresses available then as well. Thank you. Oh, and then we're just going to play a video. Staff have been doing some really good videos, and one of my staff members and the Deputy Chief Election Officer, Sky Snellgrove, did a really good video that's available on Facebook and YouTube regarding the voting locations. So let's play it.
The City of Nanaimo is conducting a by-election on Saturday, July 8th to fill a vacant seat on council. There are 2 advanced polls, one on Wednesday, June 28th, and one on Wednesday, July 5th. They're both open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at Nanaimo Alliance Church, 1609 Meredith Road. On Saturday, July 8th, there are 9 voting locations open throughout the City of Nanaimo from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Protection Island voting location is open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. The locations are McGurr Elementary School, Randerson Ridge Elementary School, Departure Bay Activity Center, Nanaimo Alliance Church, Bevan Park Social Center, Auditorium B, Nanaimo Aquatic Center, City of Nanaimo Service and Resource Center, Georgia Avenue Elementary School, Chase River Elementary School, and Protection Island Fire Hall. If you're out of town on General Voting Day or any of the advance polls, you can fill out an application to vote by mail. Application forms are available on our website. For deadlines to vote by mail and more information about where to vote, check out our website at nanaimo.ca.
Actually go out to those locations. First we contact them, and then we go out to those locations with the application forms. They get filled out. Then we go deliver the ballots once we receive them, and then we go pick up the ballots after they've been filled out.
Great, thank you.
That's good. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Motion to receive the nomination. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thornton. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Tourism Advisory Committee Terms of Reference, to be introduced by Mr. Victor Memrad, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Worship. First, I'd like to recognize the good work done by Mr. Philip Cooper, our Director of Communications and Stakeholder Engagement, and his staff, Tracy Lowen, who wrote the report that's in front of you. We're going to do two things with you today. Is Ms. Angie Troll, who is the chair of the TORAC, the Tourism Advisory Committee. And today you're going to receive two updates. The first one is just an update of where the TORAC committee is at as of this time. And also you'll receive a presentation from 2031, which is a consulting firm that the TORAC committee has actually contracted to do some work, and Mr. Hendricks will lead the discussion.
Councillor. So it's pretty simple for us today, really, because the summary for us is pretty short. We've only been around since our first meeting was on May 18th, and at that time we elected a chair, which is myself, and for the tourism, well, I guess we call it TORAC now. And also we've hired our consultants, 2031. So we have here Greg Clausen, who's going to do a little presentation for us. And then after that, we'll be doing, we'll do the terms of reference that Mr. Memo will ask to vote on. All right? Okay.
Great, thanks very much, Henry. Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. Thanks very much for your time today. Delighted to be here. I just want to give you a quick overview of what my job is and what our collective job is in support of developing a potential tourism entity or a governance model, business model for the city of Nanaimo for tourism, if you don't mind doing. So a couple of things I'll go through today is just to give a sense of what the roles are, what our objectives are of this process, the proposed engagement, the work that we're about to do, as well as how we're going to engage stakeholders in the development of this entity. Next, please. Our first objective is really quite simple, is looking to recommend some options for the City of Nanaimo. The City of Nanaimo has chosen, through the chair of the Tourism Advisory Committee, the TORAC, to bring forward 2 or 3 options that we will present to them. We will have well-versed, well-thought-out options. We will look and develop those options through consultation with stakeholders within the region itself, looking at best practice models from cities like Nanaimo across Canada and other parts of North America. We will look at previous models for the city of Nanaimo. We'll look at trends that are going on in the business of tourism, really around the globe, to help pull together all of those pieces, make those options, the strengths and weaknesses of each of those options that then the Tourism Advisory Committee can present forward to Council. Next, please. Just to give us a good sense of what our perceived role is in this process, the Tourism Advisory Council role is really looking for project direction and oversight, input, guidance, and perspective on the development of these options, as well as we are asking them to provide that recommendation to City Council. Our role as an organization, as a consultant in support of this is to ensure that we're engaging a full breadth and depth of stakeholders, not just people, those in the tourism industry, but the community at large. To execute the methodology of the program that we've created, to report back to the committee, especially during progress milestones over the next coming months, and again presenting up to 3 options as well as strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats within each of those options, so that the Tourism Advisory Committee has a good, solid recommendation with some good backup to support that recommendation to council. The city role, we ask, is to manage us, of course, administrative support to the committee, and again, those within the city itself to present those recommended options, and again, well backed up ideas behind why they've chosen those options to recommend going forward. Next, please. Our expected outcome from the project is really a detailed report on the opportunities for Nanaimo's tourism business model. I use the word governance model and business model interchangeably, so I apologize if there's any confusion, but really it is what kind of entity would support the business of tourism for the city of Nanaimo itself. We're looking also through that model to develop and create that vision for Nanaimo's tourism industry, again through stakeholder input, a review of models from other jurisdictions, and again up to 3 models presenting through the TORAC to City Council. Again, when I talk about the development of a business model, I look at things, just to give you a sense of my background, I've done this for about 4 jurisdictions, 2 in Canada, 1 in Jamaica, and 1 in the country of Jordan nationally. I myself had 13 years with the Canadian Tourism Commission, now called Destination Canada, and most of that time I was the Chief Marketing Officer, but the last year I was the Chief Executive Officer of the organization. So I've both been at the consulting side of developing business models for tourism organizations. I've also been on the receiving end and developing that model from the inside as well. So I've got some good perspectives, both nationally and internationally, on what these models should and could look like. I also follow very closely what the trends are in destination management, again, across North America and around the world. So I'm using that and bringing that perspective to the table to help with those recommendations. So when I talk about roles and functions, those are shifting as things do shift. The business of marketing is disrupting, the business of tourism is disrupting, the opportunities for tourism and trends in tourism disrupt, and therefore you have a really great opportunity to get ahead of all of those disruptions right now and to create that kind of organization that really more reflective of the future than perhaps where other organizations are looking to the past. We look at governance, of course. There's different ways of governing destinations, and many different jurisdictions have different models for that, from appointees to the boards of directors to representative-based board of the industry itself to a skills-based board. We'll look at all of those options for the governance of the organization. And of course, a solid organization really truly has solid governance that supports it. There's an organization called Destination Marketing Association International. They've created a report, a survey of over 300 destination marketing organizations, city destinations from around the world, and they've done an evaluation of what makes the best destination marketing organization. What are those ideas? What are those governance options? How are they? What makes them the most effective? So taking the results of that and boiling it and working with Nanaimo to help give you some perspective on what makes those great and why they're great, so that we can help create that better model for Nanaimo. And of course looking at jurisdictions that look and feel a little bit like Nanaimo from across the country and North America itself, to give us some clues in terms of how they're managing, how effective are they at managing their own destinations, what are they worried about, thinking about, how do they govern themselves, and how do they operate, to give us a sense that something that might be effective there might actually be effective here in Nanaimo. So in terms of our proposed engagement, sorry, I'm not used to not clicking myself, so I'm doing this just pretending I'm clicking. So I'll give you a sense. We've just, very quickly, we've got a 4-phased approach to it, just to give you a sense. We've already had our project kickoff. We have a pretty good understanding of how we're going to engage the advisory committee. which is it really just happened a little over a week ago. We're really moving into phase 2, and that is just reviewing the models that we've seen here in Nanaimo in the past, what some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses were of those particular models. Looking at destination marketing organization trends from across North America as discussed, and looking at a competitive assessment. What are your perceived competitors out there in terms of tourism? Where do they derive their competitive strengths, and where can we learn from those to help create those competitive strengths for Nanaimo? In terms of phase 3, that's where we're going to be very deeply engaged in stakeholder consultations. We've got town halls, we've got a survey, we've got something called digital listening, where we'll learn and listen digitally through social media to what the buzz is about Nanaimo and the business of tourism in Nanaimo. We will conduct workshops, I said town halls already, and really gather all of those perspectives together, and as well taking not only strong interviews from the Tourism Advisory Committee. How many members are there, do you recall? 9 members of that advisory committee, but also taking a group of other highly engaged people within the business of tourism in Nanaimo and getting their perspectives as well. Our final phase is really developing that common vision and business case for tourism. That's where we come up with our options that we'll present to the Tourism Advisory Committee, to the City Administration, so that we can ferret out those that we think will work well and those that perhaps they want to bring forward to Council, so that we can get a final recommendation to the final options. And that should happen by mid to late September of this year. Next, please. In terms of stakeholder engagement, of course, that's critically important to it. One of the things that we learned from this Destination Next survey is the most effective tourism marketing organizations are those with not just a highly evolved brand, one that people understand very well, but also a highly evolved community. Meaning that everybody in the city and the community and the region have an understanding of what tourism is, and its importance to that community, because a good place to live is a good place to visit, and a good place to visit is a good place to live. So we're finding it's critically important to engage communities in developing these tourism plans, so they themselves understand their role in developing and supporting the business of tourism. Next one, please. Yeah, this one, I should point out that in your packages you have a much broader presentation, about 20 or so pages. This is just a subset of those. But just to give you an idea of what we mean by stakeholder engagement and why they're so critically important to all of this. And again, what we're going to learn because of the survey, the digital listening, and the outright engagement. We've got a hit list of those that we really want at those town halls, so that we can ensure that we get some representation and stakeholder perspectives when we start to develop our final reports. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the final slide, just to give you some sense of where we're at. The lines on the top are the work that we're doing with in-depth interviews, the industry survey, the town hall sessions, our digital listening, our local government workshop that we'll conduct, tourism industry workshop, we'll do our draft review and final presentations, and those that we're engaging along that route to ensure that we get a broad perspective, not just simply from government, city officials, not just the tourism industry, but the community at large, who will have a perspective of how to build the right organization for Nanaimo, so that we can hone and create that tourism competitive advantage for the city. This competitive advantage that Nanaimo absolutely does have, just needs to be figured out. So that's the plan for the next couple of months. I'm delighted again to be part of that plan and to develop and help the city of Nanaimo. Thank you.
Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none? Thank you, gentlemen. Motion received. Motion received by Councilor Kessler, seconded by Councilor Hall. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So there is a recommendation on page, it's page 8, that Council approve the Tourism Advisory Committee in terms of references. Moved by Councilor Holcomb, second by Councilor Hinston. Discussions. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Advisory Committee minutes. We have someone move the Board of Variance meeting minutes. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Hall. Thank you. Discussion, errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Turner Road and Dover Road Bikeway Project to be introduced by Mr. Brad McRae, Chief Operations Officer. Mr. McRae.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. This evening we're going to talk about obtaining council's approval to add funds received from the 2017 bike program to the budget for Turner Road and Dover Road projects. Mr. Rose is here to speak to the technical pieces of the issue and finances as well if you have any questions.
Just hit him. Just hit him. Spring on. Any questions? I know I have quite a few. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. The grant application was successful and it's $92,580. And that means it will go from a $182,000 bike project to a $270,000 bike project to add the sidewalk. How much sidewalk is being added?
365 meters.
So 365 meters, so 400 feet. And is it asphalt? The reason that I was asking how it's, I felt it important for me to do some preemptive discussion before I ask my questions. So thank you for
Just like you to have support.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So will it be asphalt or concrete?
Through your worship to Councillor Bestwick, the plan would be to use concrete sidewalk there.
So the reason for my question is because we've had situations on Hammond Bay Road that are sidewalks that have been inconsistent with, from one side of the street to the other side of the street with asphalt, which is less expensive, I assume.
Through your worship, Councillor Bestwick, it is historically have to be.
So whether or not we could take advantage of some of those funds to use asphalt versus concrete for enhancement of other bike projects or upgrading to this project itself. So I'm just curious why we're going concrete when asphalt has been used for at or near.
The preference for this location would be for the consistency with the other side of the street and some of the other subdivisions.
Okay, thank you. And then my follow-up would be, given that we've been successful with this application, is there more of these opportunities as it relates to bike path funding applications that may come in 2018 or that would fit this type of project?
I think we need to wait and see what comes from next year. We will be putting in applications for grants.
Then the sidewalk was going to be committed for 2018?
No, the sidewalks was originally part of this project, but that can be removed for budget constraints.
Okay, so we have, this is my last point. In the hospital area, between Bowen and Dufferin, we have a significant stretch there of sidewalk that was in the 2018 budget, I think, or maybe even 19, and which we received considerable asks and criticisms with the growth and the utilization in that area without a sidewalk on the south side of the road that connects Bowen to the hospital. And so part of my reasons for asking the questions about if we could use asphalt versus concrete would maybe that we might be able to complement or supplement other literal bike paths or pedestrian paths if there was monies available. So it's long-winded, but it's with purpose and intent that I'm asking these questions that may or may not have been able to help us in other areas. So, thank you very much.
Councillor Holm.
Thank you to staff. It's great that we're getting some grant money for this project. And I know it was a plan already, so it was, tax doesn't really affect taxes. But one of council's priorities was the bridge down in Harewood and slash just past their pedestrian bike bridge connector that we wanted to do over the Chase River. How come we haven't, are we gonna be applying for money, grant money for that project? Because I'd like to see staff focus on council's priorities that we've set out. So like, I'm grateful that we're getting grant money for this, but I'd like to focus on some of the things that we set out as a priority and that connect the passenger or pedestrian bridge is one of the priorities that we have chosen to do. So I hope that that's going to be the next focus for money, because if I'm not mistaken, that's not budgeted. So that's directly not even in our capital plan yet at this point. Is that correct, Mr. Ballard?
So I would defer to Mr. Rosen to speak to.
Okay.
Your Worship, Councillor Hong. So the Georgia Greenway project is under design right now. We have an open house. It's in the capital plan, draft capital plan for next year. My understanding is that it's funded. I'm not sure if Victor can explain the actual funding source. You know, in terms of whether it can be received favorably from a grant application standpoint. You know, we can apply for it. I don't know if we would be received favorably or not. But certainly, you know, we look at all the projects, the funds in any given year, and we apply for whatever we think is the most likely to win a particular grant. So that's it.
Yeah. Just want to make sure you guys were applying for it.
Thanks. I've got some questions here. This started out as a bikeway and sidewalk project in 2015, when the budget was approved. Am I correct? That's correct. Okay. Then the work was restarted in 2017.
The construction?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the sidewalk was dropped due to the project cost. What happened to it?
Sorry?
The sidewalk portion of the project was dropped because of the cost.
Yes.
What happened to it? Was it moved back to another year? Was it dropped completely?
We haven't replaced it in the budget yet.
Your Worship, some of the problems when we're dealing with projects is that we have a list of things that we want to accomplish, but either through resources or finances, we're not able to accomplish them. So we do have some carryovers for other projects. Other projects we're looking at a budget for, and we may not have that much money, so we tend to break projects out from time to time. So with this particular project, I can't really speak to it specifically, but that's just the generalities of how we look at these projects.
So if we see a need, and I'm not trying to be obtuse or anything, if we see a need for a particular project such as this, where there's a sub-project, which is the sidewalk portion, and it doesn't fall within the budget, and we say, well, we can't do that based on the funds that we've got. So where does it go? Does it stay in the queue? Does it get assigned to another date? I'm wondering what happened to this one, because it appears to me as though it dropped out of sight.
Mr. So, Your Worship, we have a long list of sidewalk requests within the city. And we have this long list, and we have a process we use to prioritize those. And it's based on things like if there's adjacent sidewalk, you know, the pedestrians in the area, proximity to the school, you know, how fast the vehicles are going. So we have this priority matrix. So we have some sidewalk projects that kind of sit on top of this list, and this sidewalk on Dover is near the top of the list. The reason it was incorporated into this project is one of the things that we try and do is we try and assemble projects in a localized area to try and minimize the city going back into a neighborhood in repeated years. So for example, this might not be the top ranked sidewalk project, but it would be near the top because it's also related to this bike lane project, we would have future year. So to answer your question, if council does not want to do this project this year, you would just go back into the prioritization mix for future years.
So when the decision was made to drop it, it would have to have been done in the subsequent year. In other words, there was no funding. If we only had the $180,000 to be budgeted in 15, in 17 for this project, it didn't fall into that pot of money. And we would have said, okay, you can't do it in 17. We didn't get the 92,000. It would have had to have been done in another year. Okay. So it's just about trying to bring it back in. So my subsequent question would be, what happens to the money? If you've got a $200,000 project and you get $100,000 from a senior level government, what normally happens to the money that we get, or that we've earmarked for it? We've now got a joint project where the $100,000 is now surplus to that budget. Where would it normally go? Would it go into a surplus into other public works projects?
So, Your Worship, so I'll address your first question and then I'll address the funding aspect of it. Part of the findings of core service review was that we needed to tighten up our governance on capital projects, because what you raised and what Councillor Hong raised is a governance issue, is how do projects get into the budget, how do they come out of the budget, who decides whether something goes or doesn't go. So we need to resolve that, and we are working through that process. Now, when we get projects onto the budget, they come in with different funding sources. Some come from reserves, asset management, and stuff like that. So if a project is not going forward, then the city's contribution just reverts back to whatever the original source was and gets reassigned to future priorities.
Okay, so I'm asking about when you've got a project like this where there was a $180,000 project,
right,
and half of the money came from we got a grant from the province.
Yes.
What would normally have happened to that other half that the province have now provided this funding for? Where would that money go?
So we'd have to hold that in, and you see this in your financial statements. We talk of deferred revenue. We will hold it in that bucket of money, waiting to use it in the future for an eligible project, and so it sits there. We can't use it for anything else because it's conditionally approved for that kind of work.
Okay, thank you. And I just got final thing. Just bear with me, Councillor Kidd. The only reason why I was able to answer your question is because I did some measuring today, Councillor Bestwick, and that is that the project on Dover is 365 meters, I believe it is, or 362 meters of sidewalk. And I looked down on Dufferin, where I believe there's a far greater need for a sidewalk based on the volume of traffic and the danger that people put themselves in every day because of the volume that there is down there. That if I had a choice, I would take that money and use it on Dufferin. It's 162 meters of sidewalk desperately needed down in the 1600 block of Dufferin. The other thing we could use the $92,000 for would be for a realignment of light standards and the widening of the intersection at Boxwood and Northfield. We know that was not a good intersection when we built it. We didn't own the school property at the time, and there's some real challenging issues with trying to navigate that corner, particularly if you are a large truck trying to come out and head south on Northfield. You have to practically cross the street to make the turn. You and I talked about it here recently, that it was, just in passing, that it was something that was intended to be done in the future when we did the Boxwood extension. But if we have this little bit of money, is it possible that we could move those lights back or do a widening now that we own that property and the 160 meters of sidewalk down in Dufferin with this money? Because I think there's far greater needs there than there is up in this project that we brought here. And that's that one. The other alternative is, I've always been told that it's about $15,000 to light an intersection, flashing or a crosswalk, flashing lights. Councillor Bestwick brought up an excellent point a few weeks back or a few months back when he talked about Stewart Avenue. There's a desperate need for high visibility intersections down on Stewart Avenue. There's some major development up on Estevan and Brecken, where the church is going to be redeveloped. There was a lady that was killed on Estevan. I understand that Stewart Avenue and Brecken are part of the provincial highway program, but we could then leverage that money with the Ministry of Transportation and Highways to make those streets safer. Or we could take a look at if I'm correct in my numbers, that it's $15,000 each to light up an intersection, to put pre-warning lights on it. We could do 6 of them. Just looking at, Mr. Member is going to be telling us an awful lot over the next little while. Council, you don't have money. Council, you can't spend the money on that. Well, here's a little bit of found money that we could do some other project with, not just with. Councillor Kipp and Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you very much. It's been on the books. 2015 was the planning for 2017. It was dropped, or 2015-16 was dropped for the budget. I want to put sidewalks in some of the older areas of town. That's my view. And I think when council pulls a priority forward, I think staff has to work in that direction. Some of this stuff was in the mobility plan from the 2012-2015 strategic plan that was asked for mobility issues and things like that. So from my viewpoint, there's some areas of town that really need these sidewalks. I believe we can, a long time ago, I don't know how, I can never get it written out, directed sidewalk spending, so that when the 2-lot subdivision comes in, instead of making a bunch of sidewalks for that place, we go outward from the schools. And for me, there are some areas that need to be made safer. Boxwood Road, but also from schools are important. And with our planning, we're supposed to be able to maintain this, the originators of traffic and bring destinations closer together. But it took a woman was killed on Metro Drive, and it took us a long time, 2-3 years of me asking, going through the process with one of our constituents, asking for a light across at Metro. We went through 2 to 3 years of trying to get a sidewalk at Oliver Woods. This is important to me as a councillor, that this stuff gets pushed forward. Not just an engineering department, but something that council wants. This is what council wants. Council is asking for it, like Jerry said. We've asked for that bridge. We've asked for the recreation center in Harewood, but it gets delayed. This is stuff we asked for. You have to change the budget to meet our needs. I may jump over every 4 years and change and tumble, but I want to see that direction happen. This is a new area of town that's getting an upgrade when a whole bunch of areas in Nanaimo don't have sidewalks that are unsafe. Areas that cars fly through, right down on the end of Holly and where Pride and that comes together, and all of those streets through there are some dangerous intersections, bad driving. And so for me, I think we have asked for some of these things, but not this one. This one to me was taken out of the budget. There was a reason it was okay to be taken out of the budget, because it wasn't that important back then, only a year and a half ago. There are some important sidewalks there, and we can get flashing lights in intersections where cars will actually slow down a little. It doesn't mean that people have the right of way, but they slow down and save a life or two. Like Metro Drive took 2 years, 3 years after someone died. That's not right for me as a council. So governance versus operations, oh yeah, I understand that. Policy advice versus implementation, I understand all that. But, I don't know. It is a huge brand new sidewalk area, an area of some really nice homes. And people are flying through there. We're probably better off to put a few speed bumps in, slow the traffic down, going 60, 70, 80K down those roads, running to get a loaf of bread somewhere, because our planning's been so poor for loaves of bread within walking distance of our houses, to Hiroshima Hill. So I don't support this today. Like I said, switch it to other areas of town, more to our strategic planning stuff. And I can't support any motion on the floor.
Thanks, Chair. And I realize there is no motion on the floor at this point. I also recognize that there's lots of priorities, and there's lots of places where we'd love to have improved sidewalks and signage and lights and crosswalks and speed bumps and lots of stuff. Speaking to this recommendation, all I can say is that I'm familiar with this area, and it is an extremely busy roadway feeding McGurr and Dover schools. I see the traffic along there, and I see the pedestrian traffic, and somewhat ironically, having completed the cycling lane along that roadway, what I've been noticing the last several days is pedestrians walking along the cycling lane. thinking it's a sidewalk, creating, to me, a dangerous situation. So we were supposed to have a sidewalk along this strip before. It's gotten deferred. I know there's other places where we'd like sidewalks, but I think when we're doing this project now, let's finish it off and put this sidewalk along there. I think it's warranted. I think it is an area where there is a safety issue. So if there is a motion on the table at some point regarding this recommendation, I will be supporting it.
Councillor Brennan, are you wanting to put a motion on the floor?
No, I want to ask you a question.
Okay, no, we've got other speakers, but I do have you in the list.
Other speakers on what?
This general discussion. I don't think there's anybody prepared at this, I don't think there's anybody prepared at this point in time to put a motion on the floor.
Yes, so that I
Unless
want to ask
you are.
a question.
Are you? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to ask a question of our staff on the report.
On the presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that seems to be related.
Question?
Yeah, so to the staff, Mr. Rosen. What are the criteria that we use when we're choosing, like, and what criteria, I guess specifically, did we use when we decided to work on Turner and Dover Road?
Through your worship, Council Brennan, you speaking with respect to the pipeline or to the sidewalk or to the overall?
To the overall project.
So the overall project was identified through the Transportation Master Plan as a connection for the biking network. And through the Safer School program for Vancouver School that was done in 2008, I believe, there were several things identified that made some improvements at the Vancouver intersection. But the absence of sidewalk between Blueback and Premier was also identified during that process.
And did you work with the Greater Nanaimo Cycling Coalition in developing that safe walks to school?
That's probably predated their involvement. They were involved in the Transportation Master Plan. But the Safer School program was School District 68, RCMP, ICBC.
Okay. Okay, so all of those organizations looked at this in terms of finding a safe route to school for kids, and it involved this.
They were all involved in developing the Safe Route to School plan for Vancouver Elementary School in the Center of Use 2008. And we've recently been having conversations with them about some of their concerns regarding the safety of the crosswalk and Premier and the connection to the northern area there.
And there's Dover School there too, I guess.
The Dover High School is just
Yeah. I'm not really sure where Frank Jonay is. Is it around there? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. That was important to me.
So as we have no motion on the floor, I'm taking questions. I've got Councillor Kitt, Councillor Fuller, question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know where all the committee live, whether they live in that area of town and want it fixed up. I'm just sometimes cynical on this. What's the safety matrix you use for this? I've heard you say the safety. So I could assume it's unsafe, I could assume it's safe or unsafe. What is the safety matrix that designs that road and the number of, do you take traffic volume, do you take all your counts, do you take the population into effect in every one of these? Or do we just have an estimate? Because I gotta say that, what is the safety matrix? How many accidents have we had? And when I hear that, RCMP are involved and ICBC is involved, and then do we have traffic counts for that area? Is that what we've done for this to say that's the most dangerous spot in Nanaimo? We need to take bicycle money to build bicycle infrastructure and move it to a sidewalk. I really don't want kids riding on a sidewalk. I'd like to see them riding in good lanes. So we're trying to move money here from what was tagged for a bicycle Dover Bay Bikeway project to expand the scope of the project to include construction of a sidewalk. It's not flying with something. There's other places where we need sidewalks in this. I mean, there are, like I say, so if there's a motion coming on, what is the safety matrix?
Through your worship, Councillor Kitt, we have developed a matrix that includes volumes, traffic speed, pedestrian counts, the demographics of the pedestrians, proximity to schools and those numbers to prioritize our locations.
And that was one of the highest prioritized locations in Nanaimo with all of that data? Or was it selected? Because it seems to me that if we're doing that type of intense project to prove that we need this project, I'd like to actually find out, instead of it almost seems speculative to me that we get all this information for that project and we don't have it across the city for all of these. And honestly, when it takes me a year as a councillor, 2 years as a councillor, to get a flashing light, that's just an opposition to a councillor being involved in any operations and slowing us down for our decision-making matrix, in my concern. Because I get people coming to me every day concerned with these things and the safety issues. And it's really frustrating when this comes up and there's other dangerous areas in our community that I think are far more in need of this than this one. And especially I don't like shifting bike money to sidewalks. I'd shift car money and road money to sidewalks, but I don't want to shift bike money. I want to spend bike money on bike lanes. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller, followed by Councillor Yocum. And then we'll see if we can get someone to
I'll put the motion on the floor. I'll put the motion on the floor.
Try it.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and it seems what we're always trying to do is tie sidewalks together and not leave empty spaces. And this one does that. It's the only space a block long on that whole road that doesn't have some. So we're talking about putting them in. Where do people walk now?
Through your version to Councillor Fuller, people are using the gravel shoulder. And you're right, that between Brickyard and Yashuk Road, that's...
Yeah, my main concern is if we shift this somewhere else, it's just going to be another sidewalk in the Woodland Park. Whereas this one actually joins sidewalk and sidewalk, and then it extends right up and down that. So that's my understanding from the report. Thanks.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Question, I have 2 quick comments. I'm going to get on the earlier bandwagon and I'm going to plug Boxwood again and the Jingle Westwood intersection. But nevertheless, my question would be is the funding, because we're going to vote on this, I hear some people aren't in support of this, do we have the leverage, Mr. Rose, to move the money around, or is the funding for the 2017 Bike BC grant program earmarked for the Turner Road, Dover Road Bikeway project? Because if it's linked to that only, then it makes, whether I like it or not, the vote, how I gotta vote. So, because if it's earmarked to that specifically, or can it be moved, shifted around, like we sort of think we can at this point? I need the facts.
Through your worship to Councillor Yocum, the Bike BC money is tied to that location.
Okay.
So if we were to move the funds, if we were not to use the funds to supplement the existing project, my understanding is those monies would have to go to general revenue that Mr. Chairman was referring to. Sorry, the
reserve funds.
Reserve funds.
So it'd be held until the project was done.
Ooh, that seems odd, Your Worship. Can I have a point of clarification of that from Mr. Mema, how that works? What I understood, I understood that the money would then be put in a reserve fund and not used for the sidewalk and just earmarked for that project. And when the project was finished, the money would go back to the government?
No. Would remain with us.
Okay. So.
And be able to be spent on.
Let's clear this quickly. So we have a project and it's funded from general reserves. And then we get additional money from the government, like we have in this case. So if we decided not to do this project, so our contribution, which is the general reserve money, that goes back to our general reserve. It can be reassigned as council pleases. The money that we're getting from the province, it's conditional, so it's tied to whatever the application was. Does that clarify what you're talking about?
Well, it's tied to bike infrastructure, and now we're moving to sidewalk.
Now, this is where we need to clarify. Yeah. Right? So what we need to clarify is, I was just reading here what the eligible proposals would look like. In some programs, the government would basically hardwire to a specific project because they want the money spent immediately, In some, you have to go back and say, well, we've changed our priority. Now, you run the risk of changing priorities and them saying, well, we're gonna take our money back. These are the cities ready to do this. So we can clarify that piece, but what's important to note though is that the application went in specifically for that, for that project.
So Mr. Mayor, since it was my floor, just to close, I sort of view this, do I think it could be spent elsewhere? Sure, but sort of the provincial component, like, bad example, like the Northfield, the province is funding a piece in Northfield. We can't move the provincial's money around from that Northfield like we wish maybe some may wish. So I'm sort of, that's not it? Here's my final kick at this.
No, he is very correct. You cannot take this money away from that project.
So I was right.
He is very right.
But I just need to know that so I vote properly, so I don't want to lose money.
Okay, so.
Thank you.
So this was questions. So I've got two councillors that would like to move a motion. I appreciate council's indulgence that we could have this discussion here. Councillor Bestford.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that council approve the use of grant funding received for the Turner Road Bikeway project to expand the scope of the project to include the construction of a sidewalk. And I'd like to speak to it for the second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum asked me a question, and I would have asked if its relation to the funding application, relationship to this specific project, which I've had answered. And then I assume that the sidewalk was inclusive of the original application and budget when we budgeted for this project. And since we put this project in the queue, it's increased by about 100 grand. That's what I understand. I don't disagree that there's other as important pieces of sidewalk, and maybe in my mind others that are more important. I am concerned about Councillor Hong's inquiry as it relates to the bridge in Harewood, that this council made a strategic priority being shelved, which for the time being, which I didn't understand that, or I didn't know that was the case. But with all of that said, we're going to talk about speed humps in a minute. We've talked, if we want to talk about Northfield and Boxwood, we've talked about putting sidewalk along there because of the pedestrian traffic there is such a heavy volume. And we've talked about that for 3 or 4 years. We've talked about speeding on that stretch. This council a lot with the development in Boxwood. So could I argue here real easily that the Boxwood connector would be the place for speed humps and a sidewalk? Real easy. But I won't, and I'll support the motions on the floor, but I certainly hope that without any criticism that our staff and council are listening to what the discussion's been for the last 30 minutes about projects and priorities.
Mr. Rosen.
Okay, Mr. Rosen.
I just wanted to speak to the comment and the concern from council about the Georgia Greenway project. Just want council to know that staff are working very hard to get that ready to get built next year. Design is underway right now. We had an open house, so it's well underway. So just so council knows that it hasn't stalled. It's moving along quite quickly actually. Normally for our projects we start the design about 2 years in advance. So there's some concern about the sidewalk on Dufferin, which is currently scheduled for 2019. It's been scheduled there for 5 years, I think. So staff are currently right now in the process of starting the design of that sidewalk. And that's pretty standard for the work we do. We started well in advance so we can ensure that we have the property. We've ironed out all the sort of utility complex. There's quite a bit of detailed work that has to go into getting these projects ready. So, anyways, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. So we've got two, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Hong.
Hey, I'm gonna try and keep this one simple. think I got it figured out. Originally, we had 188,000 city money budgeted. We applied for a grant, got 92K. That means 88,000 of the city money doesn't get used. You also have this sidewalk in there that you want to do at the same time. So that would take in the city money at 88,000, bringing the budget up to 272,000. Because you have to use the provincial money, the grant, for bike path. So if we chose not to do the sidewalk, that would leave that 98,000 back into the budget to do something else. And we could do the sidewalk the laser plan. But you're saying that it's easier to do it all at once.
Yeah.
Cool. In that case, I'll support it, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. I support the first part where council approved the use of the grant funding received for the Turner Road and Dover Road bike project. It's hard for me to support the second part because in all fairness to bike paths across this city, we should be using that $92,000 that we saved for another bike path. We've committed $180,000 for this specific bike path. We got 90. So that gives us another 90 for another bike path. Because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about bike paths and the money that we got for bike. We got free money, and then we just said, hey, let's just use that other free money for sidewalks. I can't. That's hard. I get why staff want to do it, and I get it. It's a lot easier if we do everything at once. Since you're there, you might as well do it. It's kind of like a little upgrade, and it makes sense. But in all fairness to the bike community, I'm surprised Leo's not here, that we should be using this money that we saved. We saved $92,000. We should use it for another bike path somewhere else. Because that's where it seems like to me what we should be doing politically with the money that we get for, and I get why we're doing sidewalks. That's just my take on it. So it's hard for me to, I haven't decided where I'm sliding, but I'd like to see this money to go to bike paths because that's what we got the grant for and we're saving $92,000. Well, let's put it to another bike path. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. McCray.
Yes, just in response to a couple matters, Mr. Rose wishes to say something, Your Worship.
Thank you, Worship and Council. I just wanted to clarify that the original budget and the scope did include the sidewalk. It was both the bikeway and the sidewalk, and it was removed due to the market changes in value and view of the costing. That was the only reason it was removed from the scope at the time. So just to be clear on what the initial expectation of the deliverable was.
Thank you. Thank you. One final, Councillor Kipton, I'm going to call a question.
Well, it says on this page 41 of our agenda, options 2, the council not approve the use of the grant received for Turner Road and Dover Road bikeway project, and the grant funding is used to offset the current budget for the project. That's a bit, it seems an odd sentence the way that's written. And then it says budget funding approval for the budget will remain unchanged, and the grant funding will be used to offset funds budgeted by the city of Nanaimo for the project. So the project would change though. Let's say that. So what I heard a second ago, what was the overages that caused the sidewalk to be taken out? Why would, if mobility and our strategic plan, the first, in option 1, it talks that policy implications, including sidewalks, strategic priorities, including sidewalk, political implications, public feedback about the road. Why would this stretch of sidewalk be taken out then if it's such an important part of our strategic planning and it was taken out? And how much was the project over, above and beyond this? Like, what was it budgeted for? What's it coming in at? What's, I don't even see those figures in there. I have no idea now where the project is, how much it's over, or whatever. Is it just over the 90,000? Because I've had some concerns with project overages, and then no reporting on it, and where the reporting or the overages have gone and come, and so what is the cost? How much was taken out because our pricing was over what we estimated? How far off was it?
Through your worship to Councilor Gibb, the sidewalk component was actually removed at the 75% design stage, so there are no overages at this point. It was projected that the sidewalk was going to be about $140,000.
Well, you see, that's problematic to me as far as budgeting and stuff goes. If we got a project and we remove something to make it work, and then we come back later to fill it in, that's not good for me. We did that with Nick when we put in plywood later, we took the plywood out, and we didn't put the sprinkler system in, and then we get hit for it later. It's problematic to me. And that's what Core Services Review has pointed out on behalf of the city that we've done now. So your worship, when I read this language, doesn't even make sense to me in that first one. So I'm really concerned that we're flipping things around. We took something out before we budgeted it. Now we're going to throw it back in because we're using a grant that was for bicycle. And I'm surprised Leo isn't here either. And I'm not, just like I say, this is a shifting around of things. I guess it's just almost like a shell game. We're moving stuff around. And to me, it's frustrating. Because I don't even know the financial implications here, other than that we're going to use a grant that we got to fulfill something that we didn't do well in the beginning. We had to cut a project out. So I'm against this. And the language in here, it's poorly written, poorly explanation, it's steered for one review only. I'm not happy.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. It's been moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed, please show up. Councillor Pong, Councillor Kipp, and Mayor McKay opposed. Motion carries. Next one, revised application process, social planning grants, introduced by Mr. Dale Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council is aware, the city's been providing social planning grants since 2001 in the form of social development and community service grants. And previously, those were reviewed by the Social Planning Advisory Committee, recommendations ultimately coming to Council. We've had some changes, of course, to our mandating structure of our committees, and it requires that we develop a new process. So tonight, we're introducing for you a new application process for what we're now calling social response grants and community vitality grants. The same budget of $60,000 for the social response grants and $25,000 for community vitality grants will be available. The deadline is August 1st for applications. And much like we do now with the Culture and Heritage grants, the applications for the grant money will be reviewed by staff. Recommendations are proposed to come forward to the Finance and Audit Committee. So this evening we're asking Council to approve the application process for social planning grants.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Staff.
Thank you.
So staff is going to be reviewing the applications and making recommendations to the Audit and Finance Committee. Where does the Community Vitality Committee come into it? Given that the name of the grant program, it says follows social equity, community wellness, and vibrant neighborhoods. And I kind of thought that's what Community Vitality Committee was up to. So if we don't have public input into it, then is that kind of the...
That is correct. With the reconfiguration of the committees, the grant reviews we're taking away from the committees. They're outside of the mandates of the committees now.
Yeah.
So both with community vitality, previously the Culture and Heritage grants would have gone through their committee.
Right.
But under the new structure, they're not. So that's why primarily the reason we're before you this evening is to identify this new structure. We did the same with grants earlier for Culture and Heritage that were reviewed by staff, came through the Finance and Audit. The downtown grants were another example of that. These would be following that protocol.
Okay, so one more question. the division is 60,000 and 25,000. The $25,000, is that the money that will be, that we've already decided will be used for doing the cleanup in the downtown area in response to the neighborhoods and businesses that were complaining about the effects on their areas?
Your Worship, I believe that to be true, but it could possibly, that would have been carryover money from 2016. I'll have to confirm that for council.
Okay, I think it is because when I asked Mr. Horn, he said that the money had formerly been used to do studies and like research and stuff. Okay, thank you.
Before Councilor Brennan asked the question, there was a mover and a second. Did you get those? Okay, thank you. So I've got a move by Councilor Bestwick and seconded by Councilor Pitt. Councilor Hall, pardon me. Okay, discussion on the motion, so Councilor Bestwick.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, has August the 1st always been the deadline for applications?
I'm sorry, through your worship, Councillor Bestwick, I'm not sure what we've done in past years. I think possibly we're running a little bit later this year just because of the change in the format than we would normally do. So I think next year we'll see an earlier intake, I would expect.
So for 2017, that's my issue, or not issue, but my concern. By the time it gets to that peak out, will be late September, possibly even October. So anybody that's in the 10 months or 9 months preceding that, that's made it, that's already had their event, may miss 2017 in its entirety, potentially. So I understand that there might be some time complications, but in many of our grant application circumstances, we have more than one intake. So might there be consideration or appropriate to have 2 intakes during the year? So let's just fast forward to 2018. If we wait till August the 1st for the deadline application, then those 8 or 9 months, organizations won't know until October. And I'm using October as a fictitious time that may be realistic. Whether or not their grant has been successful, application has been successful or not. So so my question is, why August the 1st? And why not 2 intakes for 2018 and beyond?
Your Worship, I think certainly having an earlier intake would be probably preferable both for the city but also for those organizations relying on these grants, and keeping in mind that the intent is that they're intended to be sort of for 1-year projects, sort of one-off projects. Certainly we could look at having more than one intake. I think what I would suggest is we'll do it early next year and see what the response is at that time. And if we think it's appropriate, we could always have a second. If we don't get full response to the request, we can always have a second intake later in the year.
So just a quick follow-up. I appreciate that explanation. However, if we approve the motion and the terms of reference as it's in front of us, August the 1st is the date. It won't be just subjective, arbitrary. We'll do a 1 intake by April. And then if we don't get enough interest, we'll do another one in August. Well, no, that's not what it says.
To your worship, I would note that the guidelines and criteria are specific to the 2017, so we could certainly, staff could look at amending those in years going forward to clarify that. So if the desire of council is to have specifically 2 intakes in 2018, if council want to make that motion, staff would make sure that was followed.
As Seamus jury is also found.
So if I might say, so not to muddy this, okay, if that's what we're doing, if we're going to revisit this for 2018 at the end of 2017, then I'm okay with that. But anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Thanks.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Bestwick. We have had some discussions about more than 1 intake for some of the other grants. So thinking that 2 2 intakes a year would probably be a way better scenario. As well, the recommendation that council approve the application process for social planning grants, you could always add in that that staff look at the date or report back to you with the date that we have set right now and look at other options for the date, but you could approve the application process subject to looking at the dates. But I do know we have talked about 2 intakes, so what you just discussed before, you said you were okay with that.
So I appreciate that, thank you. I'm okay for 2017 then, knowing what I'm hearing you guys talk, and that's fine.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just can't support this. I can't support it for the primary reason is that there's no community involved in this, in the making of these decisions and determining what are the needs and how the proposal best meets the needs. This is so little money that you have to have a really strong connection to the community and the social needs of the community to know if a grant of $8,000 is going to make any difference at all. And with all due respect to our staff, they're not working on the ground. And that's where the expertise needs to come from if you're only going to be funding organizations with that small amount of money. Community wellness is not incorporated into our staffing model. Vibrant neighborhoods is, but in a way that's different than the social aspects of it, the social fabric of a particular community, not the sort of generalized kind of academic view of how do we make vibrant communities, how do we do this or that. We need the people who are on the ground delivering the service, meeting with the people who require the service or who benefit from the service, because it's not always people who are down on their luck. It's oftentimes neighborhoods who have specific needs. So I just can't, it's just too small amount of money. There's no representation from the ground, and the sort of wording that we use is not going to be reflected in this process. It's a process that's way too far from the ground. Way too far.
No further speakers. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Norman opposed. Motion passes. Next item, Ross Road Trail Traffic Calming Project. Trial. It says trail.
In the actual agenda, it says trial.
Ross Road Trial.
Thank you, Worship. So we normally tell council when we're putting speed bumps as permanent structures on roads. This is to provide information to council that we're moving forward with having temporary speed humps in our quote-unquote arsenal. So we're able to take these speed humps and put them on different roads to be able to determine their impact that they do have, whether they're being useful or not useful. One of the areas that staff has looked at is the Ross Road area, in which 85% of the year, the 85 percentile vehicle speeds exceeded the threshold. So that's why we're looking at putting them in there as one of our beginning points for our trials. So I will pass it on to Mr. Rose for any further technical comment.
Gentlemen, that's it. Nothing to say? Nope. Okay, questions? Or moving motion?
Just a question.
Question.
So,
Councillor Baum.
thank you. So we can move these to Foxwood, right? In front of Vive and all the other ones that people are speeding, so these are movable? Are they load tested to handle semi-trucks, or are these just little car motors?
Through your worship, Councillor Hall, they are roadworthy. We need to look at our traffic calming guidelines overall to determine if that would be an appropriate use for them. But they're totally modular and you can move them any road in the city, depending on the bill.
Okay, yeah, it's like those traffic cameras, Clint, when they move them around, you don't know, the box is there, because you never know if there's a camera in there. So it's good that we can do these, thank you.
So you were trying to figure out whether these were the Lady Kenmore with the soft touch controls, or whether they were actually the Binford 2000 model. Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I'm just unclear if we have a new procedure now for empty cows or anything, whereby if you want to make a motion, you have to wait till every question's been asked in order to be on the speaker's list. Or if you would want to make a motion so that we can have a motion actually on the table and still ask questions as it relates to the subject. So that's my first question. Is there a new procedure now?
No.
No.
There's no such thing as an empty cow, there hasn't been for about 3 years.
So this cow meeting, so take the FP off, I get that. So is there a new procedure for these meetings on alternating Mondays? If you have a question, the queue changes. If you want to make a motion, the queue changes. Straight question.
Well, if a report is being provided and the council wishes to ask questions, they can ask questions. However, if somebody wants to do a motion, one of the challenges is sometimes their questions don't get answered before a motion gets on the floor. Would you like to be more
We can
formal?
ask questions after a motion has been made. So, yeah, I prefer formal, sure. Yeah, I prefer formal. So my question then on this is, we've identified Ross Road as a road that has an 80+% ratio of people speeding on it. So we're going to make that a priority for a test pilot. I've never heard Ross Road of being of this concern, but I've heard of Boxwood Road in Northfield being of this concern. Way back to the driving academy that runs their program through there, Councillor Gilcom has made many suggestions that we do something with the speeders when the kids are doing their gymnastics and their whatever dance classes. And the area has grown. We have a bar there now. We got a bar there with a patio, 2 of them. The liquor store around the corner, so I'm sure everybody's got to get there before it closes. How do we arrive at what stretch of what road we're going to put speed humps on as a calming measure, as a pilot? What's number 2 on our list? What's our second one that we're going to do next? Because this one's the most dangerous. Which one's next?
Through your worship, Councillor Bestwick, this was a project that concern was brought to us by the community, and we applied our traffic calming guidelines to go to review. Within those guidelines, we have features that we can use depending on the classification of road. Our higher classes of roads, such as Bowen or Northfield or Uplands, are not subject to things like speed humps or vertical traffic calming features. That's something that those are roads that we would introduce something like a curb extension or some sort of a narrow lanes to address speed issues. Whereas Ross Road is a neighborhood collector, which is the highest level of highest class of road that we can consider speed humps on. So, to answer your question, what's the next highest priority? I think this is the one that the community's brought to us right now. We're regularly receiving concerns about speed, but often they don't fall within the guidelines of the traffic calming.
Follow-up, so Oliver Woods, we had many concerns about the front of Oliver Woods. And we heard about that from the community. We've heard about it on Boxwood. Heard about it. I've heard about it between Golden Road and the hospital. Heard about it. I haven't heard at this table or anywhere about Ross Road being at this level. So typically we would get somebody would send mayor and council a letter, a complaint, we would have dealt with it somewhere, Public Works Committee or Parks and Rec Committee or somewhere. So I'm just bewildered because again, here we are, it's been, doing sidewalks and bike routes and here we are, now we're talking about doing speed humps for traffic calming on a road that I haven't been aware it's been a major problem. I haven't heard about it. But I've heard about many others. So and this is a 3-month test. So in 3 months, are we taking them out and putting them somewhere else? And where is that next place they're going then? Somebody tell me. Have we posted signs on Ross Road to say, coming to the neighborhood near you soon? Have the cops set up the meter readers out there that flashing, this is your speed, this is your speed, this is your speed, slow down, slow down? Have they been doing that? Have we got sports on that? Because there's other, again, in my mind, there's other roads that are more significant than this one, just in my mind, because I haven't heard any complaints from anybody at or near Ross Road. Comment?
Do you want to answer that?
I can't yet, through your worship, that's the best way. We have heard from the community, we've received invitations from the community. We have worked with the RCMP, we have worked with our public works division, employed the speed meter board. We have worked through all of these processes and we've not achieved the results that have satisfied the community, so we are continuing to move forward with the common process. And the trial process is to work with emergency services to get feedback from them on the effectiveness and any operational changes that they see coming from it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. My concern with this is temporary, because we're going to spend $10,000 installing these temporary for 3 months. Wouldn't it make sense if the data is already there, just pour the concrete or asphalt? If the evidence is already there on this one, just.
Okay, staff, let me answer.
That would make sense to me. If the data is accurate, just save the money and do it real.
Through your worship, Councillor Yocum. So one of the challenges that we're faced here, and many communities face this as well, is there's sort of competing challenge here. So one of them is the public safety benefit around traffic calming and slowing vehicles down, so the interactions with pedestrians and cyclists and people coming in from their driveways is a bit safer, versus the delay that's caused by emergency vehicles. So emergency vehicles are delayed a little bit by a speed hump or a traffic circle or what have you. So you have sort of two ends of the spectrum there. You've got emergency services that are trying to get to somebody in a hurry. You want them to be able to get there faster. And you've got a lot of other vehicles that are sort of lower risk, but there's a lot more of them. So you got this competing ends of the spectrum there. So many communities have kind of gone through a large, elaborate public process to establish, what they want to try and achieve. So that's why we know there's people speeding on Ross Road. We know what a solution is, but we're just not sure how much of an impact it'll have on emergency services. So what we want to do is we want to put these temporary speed humps out there, see what the impact is on the general public traveling, as well as get some data on emergency services vehicles. And then after that's completed, we'll likely be back to council with a recommendation to, either one way or the other, to either install them or to some other way to deal with this.
So, okay, Jerry, let's finish up. I'm sort of, I'm not perplexed. I get your rationale and totally respect it. I'm just concerned why. What's the ultimate end game? Slow down speeders, or just do a trial? Because you can put these in temporarily. People will go, oh my God, slow down. Then you remove them. Guess what? They're gonna speed again. So I don't know the goal line, the end game for here. So because there's these roundabouts, whichever the firemen complain about the one over here, with no thorough big trial like this one, where that's one of the main routes, the one by Gyro Park there by the Little League field. So I'm just perplexed, and I've never heard of Ross. I don't even know where Ross Road is. I think it's over by Long Lake, sort of, isn't it? Back behind Van McKay, sort of. What's that?
My office.
Yeah, back that way. So, and I am going to be making a motion after this, seeing this, where to move it next for, we call it Boxer, because I'm just one person, but my percentile vehicle speeds would be around 100% when I witnessed a Boxer for the last 4 straight years, sitting there for 2 hours once a week. So, I don't know. This is, I respect what we're doing here. I just don't like the temporary idea of spending $10K for temporary. And I get we're gonna do pilots, and I'm rambling here. I'll just quit. But my final comment on the Boxwood is I heard some rationale one day at a council meeting talking about, but they do semi-truck training down here. So what? You think that the truck driver in his or her career is ever not gonna go over a speed bump? So anyways, I'm digressing. Sorry, Jerry.
Councillor Fuller, followed by Councillor Kip.
Yeah, I find the rationale kind of a little bit wonky on this one. Whether they're trying to slow down traffic or slow down fire trucks. We're measuring whether it's going to slow down fire trucks. The result of doing this test might be someone dies because of a 30-second delay that we really don't know about. But that could happen because they say it may, it might, it may. My ideas on testing something like this with response vehicles would be to do it on a street that isn't so busy and speed. There's lots of streets with slow enough traffic or no traffic where they could go and test these things and see if they actually do slow them down. I get what you're trying to do, but I thought originally it was just to slow down vehicles. And then I see that the emergency services are concerned, but we want to try it. It's just a weird one to me.
This information. Councilor Kip.
Thank you very much. I hear this is a policy or an operational decision by petition, which is a bit of a concern to me. I've never seen a petition coming in for a complaint. I've actually had some drainage problems that I talked to city staff about on that specific straight stretch a while back, and I knew that was a remedy. It seems very pick and choose about priorities, because I've heard nothing but complaints over here about this traffic circle on Wentworth and Kennedy. Nothing but complaints. Public coming to us, stop it, why are you doing this, what are you doing? Why are you experimenting in my neighborhood, what are you doing? The curbs up, even those signs, I wish when you come down the street, the signs are straight for that road. Some kid's gonna go through that and slice himself. They should be turned a little to face the oncoming traffic. The European designs have that down pat. But this to me, like a policy by petition, what is council's priority on this? We're getting this as I hear from staff, they're just sort of letting us know they're doing this. It's what we're looking here, they received the report, and that's all they want us to do, they're doing it. So I don't even know why bring this to me, let's talk for hours about this, or we sit at a strategic planning session and give the direction of what we want on these things. So from my perspective, yeah, I like the idea of some speed humps. They slow some people down. People are driving $60,000 four-wheel drives. They don't slow down. The people that drive, what the cops should be there, if they're doing 64K on that road and there's no sidewalks and the driveway's over, you set the cops up there every day, poach a bunch of money. We'll have all sorts of money if we can get some of it back for all sorts of stuff. So from my perspective, this separation again of governance and operations, we get pushed into supporting this, and then somebody will come back and say, well, you supported it, you voted for it. So I'm not into this temporary thing. I think that other things we can do permanently, and temporary could be like our bus shelter, what, a decade? That could be temporary with this. So organizationally, I'm really concerned with this type of stuff, why I'm even dealing with it. If I've nothing I can say about it, nothing I can do to make a change, nothing I can do to make the traffic circle go away, then why am I dealing with it? It's not a policy issue for me. It's a vote to support something that I don't really agree with the methodology, the process, the matrix that's going on, and that's my political view. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McRae?
This was only again brought towards council because this is the history of how things are brought whenever there's a speed bump. It's sort of like a duck, so we decided to bring it in front of council just to let them know. There is the benefit though to council, your worship, which is exactly what this council is talking about. If they have a priority that they want to bring forward as far as a motion, then they can do that in the near future in regards to using these speed humps that are placed on our design guidelines, and if council decides to, as the will, tell us what to do, then that's what we do.
Councilor Brown?
Well, I just want to say that I appreciate the need to test this out, because Ross Road eventually turns that corner, and then you have 3 seniors care facilities that I understand have emergency vehicles at their place regularly. So there's Berwick, then there's the, for want of a better name, the Pink Palace, and then there's Lakeview. So you have 3 seniors care facilities. You have to know whether you're going to slow down the response time. And so I'm actually really appreciative of this. And I would like to get an end report and let us know how that went, whether they were seriously impeded, and and what you chose to value, to find was the value you were going to raise above the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hall?
Thank you. I support this because I like it because now the public knows we have these things as a temporary base. So now, like Departure Bay, for example, we've gotten emails about Departure Bay School. So now if we can deploy these in other areas where council is getting concerns from citizens, we have the ability to move these, to test these. If these tests prove difficult for emergency personnel, then when a citizen comes to me and says, well, why don't you put a speed bump on the street? And I said, well, we have tested speed bumps and this is proven flawed for emergency personnel. So I have an answer to them because I don't know if we've tested any of these that we can do. So this is a good test, and I don't know why Ross Road is a huge thing, but again, I don't go, wouldn't drive by there, so I wouldn't know anything about it. But we do, like Councillor Yocum said, there are some recommendations on some streets that I'd be interested in looking at after 3 months. So I'm willing to try this.
Councillor Gill?
I don't know, if we put speed humps down, do we have a little sensor that says, oh, guys, slow it down? Yeah, I mean, how do you evaluate something that comes from home? Honestly, what methodology can you use to say the fire truck has to brake for a second? It's typical speed through there would only be about 50 km because of the road, the dynamic coming off of Evergreen or all those roads around there. So the dynamics of trying to say you can actually objectively evaluate this type of thing. If the public says slow down, or you put up the readers again and see that people slow down, and they're only going to slow down for those 2 little bumps. Then they're going to boot it again, because that's the nature of our arrogance of driving and entitlement. So could staff tell me how they would evaluate? They're going to ask the trucks, or get a hold of BC Ambulance and get a hold of fire trucks and say, did you slow down going through there? Or do you know that they were dispatched through there and you call them and did they, like, this sounds like a lot of work. And it's just traffic calming. it needs to be slowing down, there's no doubt. But every street in Nanaimo is under siege right now from speeding drivers. Every street in Nanaimo. I almost got clocked today coming through around on Bush Street. The guy come around the corner so fast, I comes to my lane, right? It's the drivers. And how do we improve them? And worry about a fire truck? I tell you, if you want complaints, every fire driver I've talked to, an ambulance guy said that traffic circle that Wentworth and Kennedy is smashing their tires, and they're going around it, they're going down other streets enough to get away from it. I mean, it's got a big truck with thousands of gallons of water in it having to curve like that around a thing. You get high-speed wobbles, a speed bump would have been better to slow down by the car. Even the bicycle committee didn't like that. Because your cars are coming out of there now without even stopping. I don't know where we get these policies, we make it up, and how do we evaluate it? How do you evaluate whether it works?
Through your worship, Councilor Kip, we've got a couple of years of data from the fire services on their responses from fire halls, 2 and 3, I believe it is.
Yeah, they're way outside of the 6-minute response services areas. Way outside. So the 30 seconds is.
So can we get the answer? Just
Can I see the
point of
data?
order.
Please send me the data. I'd like to analyze it. I'd like to look at it. The fire hall sent you 3 years of data on that. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that data. Thank you.
Mr. Member.
Thank you, Worship. Very much welcome the debate, I think, on these files. A couple of things. I think that we are all better served by evidence-based decision making. And this is a good example. What we need to probably articulate better is how we prioritize, how complaints come into the system, how we prioritize, how we gather that information, and how we respond to that process. So we'll take that away and we'll work through that process. These issues, like Mr. Rosen said, you have to balance some of these things, and there's no perfect answer to these things. So work with the evidence we have, try something out, and come back and adjust and make sure that it works. So we'll take this away in terms of how do complaints about Boxwood, what's going on there. Did we lose the information? Did we, in the process of gathering this, is it next in line, who is not in line, that kind of stuff. So we'll get that whole buttoned up as quickly as we can. But what I'm trying to say is we are all best served by evidence-based decision making.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
I totally agree with you, we are better served by evidence-based information. But evidence-based information in a location that puts less risk to human life than 3 seniors facilities because of the slowing down of the fire truck. Now, there are 3 seniors facilities, so why test it where there's a high risk of life if it actually slows it down? Testing it makes less of a risk for life. Makes a lot more sense. I'm not opposed to this because it is just received for information, so just maybe in the future.
I actually agree with Councillor Fuller, Your Worship. I think there's, like I said, we'll take this offline and kind of like have a internal discussion take into account some of that stuff and be able to say, here is a high risk area based on, seniors around and that kind of stuff, and figure out how we can respond to those areas as well.
Thank you. Okay, there's been no motion at this point.
I'll move to receive the information.
Okay, moved by Councillor Gunn and seconded by Councillor Howell.
Just quick, please. Just instead of having nice, respectful debates and different views this evening, I don't think too many emergency response vehicles for those elderly folks home are gonna ever take that route, by the way. They're also gonna take the one off highway by Long Lake and go on that route. So we could pull any of them. We already know they're not gonna take that route. So I just want, because we know where they're located on this map. They're down here towards Madman McKay and etc. So that's So I don't like fear statements out there when let's be real, keep it real here. Thank you.
Let's keep it real, they already talked to them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
You just said.
Yes.
So I wonder if I could, through Mr. Mema to staff, ask a question. And that is, will there be council?
I'm not talking, she's
No council.
babbling to me.
Ask a question. So if we could, are there going to be temporary signs put up warning of these temporary speed bumps? Thank you. Okay, so there's been a motion to receive. Call the question, all those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Next item is correspondence not related to report on council, is letter dated 2017, May 23rd. Move received by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Holmes. Discussion? Being none, call the question, all those in favor, opposed, motion carries. The next item is under business, Councillor Bestwick in film. I just have a question to ask staff. Go ahead.
I was just going to bring up that the notice of motion, the wording has changed, which I mentioned earlier in the late items.
Right, so on the annotated, it says, Councillor Bestwick in film, see addendum, yet I don't see this in the addendum anywhere. Is that just a clarifier?
Yes. So thank you, Your Worship. It is in the addendum as being added because of, it was at last week's council meeting. So it didn't make the agenda printing the next day, I believe, or maybe, yeah, no, it did. So I think that was just an error on that.
Great, thank you.
It's not in the green.
No, it was actually in the actual agenda itself. And then on the late items this evening, I just added that staff had changed.
Okay, so the notation is see addendum, that's incorrect. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
only see that version.
Okay. So, Councillor Bestwick, would you care to move the motion?
Do you have the wording?
Well, I don't need an addendum. I am not interested in, at this point, since it's defeated, to have an amended notice of motion. So my motion is that the city of Nanaimo provide up to $30,000 toward the program known as InFilm for 2017.
Second motion.
So it's been moved and seconded under the original motion. Councillor Brennan.
I'd like to see this go to the Finance and Audit Committee with a report from our staff to the committee. Gives us information on what the expected return on the investment would be, what recommendations we have from the Economic Development Committee that we have, ask for a financial statement, all of those kinds of things that we would typically want to see.
Thank you. Mr. Mello.
Worship, there's two comments that I would like to make. First one is, InFilm doesn't qualify for Council for CD grants. I've said this over and over again, it does not qualify. Number two, even if it qualified, unless you're asking me to take money out of reserves, which I would recommend, we don't have funding for that. So those are the comments I would say if you are going to proceed with the motion as it sits.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, followed by Councillor Bestwick. Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Question to Mr. Mena. Then, at the regional board table, where InFilm comes to the regional district of Nanaimo and asks for funding, and we contribute approximately 65% of the amount, are you telling me that InFilm is not entitled to make a grant funding application to the regional district of Nanaimo?
Through your worship, so RDN has its own criteria for grants, and I don't know how much different it is from us. For us, really part of why this wouldn't qualify is that it's not resident here. So we don't give grants to an organization come out of Victoria to have to be resident here. So that's the criteria we have for City of Nanaimo. I don't know what the other team has.
So thank you. So all of the years that Infilm has been receiving grant funding from the city of Nanaimo through the NEDC, which is our operation. It could, for the several years that it was parked on Front Street and not parked in this building, funding was provided to Infilm through an arm's length, 100% funded, well, 98% funded commission of the city of Nanaimo.
So through your worship to Councillor Bishop, technically, NEDC could do things that the city can't do by virtue of the legal standing.
They did.
So they did. That's why it qualified through that process.
Follow up. So, in terms of needing data, needing financials, needing legalities, so the organization known as Infilm, which works up and down Vancouver Island from, I'm going to say, Cowichan to Campbell River, who is funded by municipalities and regional districts in that corridor. And the assumption that I would make is the majority of our policies and procedures are likely similar to best practices up and down Vancouver Island. I'm going to guess we're not far off the majority of grant funding policies and procedures. And Courtenay or Parksville or Qualicum or Duncan or Camel River. And when millions of dollars are being injected into this community by a non-profit, year-over-year organization that has submitted to us countless reams documents of the value of their participation in Nanaimo. Approximately 11,000 hotel room nights this year. It's really hard, and forget all the other money. It's really hard for me to comprehend how we can find this doesn't fit anywhere in the city of Nanaimo. This grant funding application or there's not an alternative method. There's not a fund somewhere that is for economic development, tourism, and we will, on practically every single meeting that I attend, we will award some amount of money to some organization that shows up. And this comment will not be misdirected at an organ. Bevan Park, a sold-out dinner. People go, well, I don't know that we're going to sell out. We might not get where we need to get to 6 weeks before the event. So it sells out. What do? We give them a free $2,800, $3,000 room because they begged and pleaded. I don't know if the people that were putting that on actually were from Nanaimo. It might have been, I don't know. We do it every meeting. And sometimes we don't even know that it's coming. It just shows up. And there's the political guru. Who's our guru? The guy that's written books and we all go to all his courses? George Cuff. Don't make any decisions on the fly. teary-eyed. Don't do it when people come and you're emotional and everybody in the audience is teary-eyed and crying. And so what do? We can't wait to approve it. So something that we've had in front of us for weeks, if not months, can't get it to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, can't get it there. Can't get it to a cap, can't get it to a regular, can't get it on the agenda. Which agenda is it on? Oh, we've amended the motion. I didn't. Nobody called me to say, here's the new amended motion that I've been trying for weeks and months to get on. So I'm frustrated. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Councillor Brennan, followed by Councillor Yocum, followed by Councillor Kipp, followed by Councillor Hong.
Well, I would like to refer this matter to the Finance and Audit Committee and ask that staff prepare a report outlining the possible ways that this could be accomplished if council so wanted. I mean, there's no point getting angry at our staff and about something that we apparently didn't understand. We didn't comprehend that piece. And let's send it to the committee where we can take some time and review a report from staff that gives us, that says if you want to do this, then you need to amend this, this, and this, or you need to set these things up. We probably should be looking at the 2018 budget, but if we can't do it, we can't do it. And so we need to ask our staff, how can we do it? Seems a reasonable approach to me.
Are you moving a motion to refer to Finance and Audit?
Yeah, with the proviso that staff prepare a report outlining the difficulties and possible ways to overcome them.
Mr. Memo?
So, Councillor, let's be efficient in our decision making. It's unfortunate Councillor Westwood didn't get my email this morning asking for his permission to make the amendment. What staff is doing, we're being honest and upfront with you, and we are making a proposal as to how we think this could actually work for infill. So we're not trying to block funding to infill. We're trying to facilitate the process. So we could refer it to finance, we could go out and write a report, but you could take the amended notice of motion and take a look at it. If Councillor Bestwick is agreeable to that amendment, it's an efficient way to facilitate providing resources to infill. That's all staff is trying to do. We're trying to block anything.
Where is it?
Staff is, I think, is trying to put it on the board.
So just follow on with my comments. I still think it should go to a Finance and Audit Committee where we can sit down and go over it and read the information. And I don't think it's adequate just to figure out a way of doing it. I think we need more information from infill.
So you're moving a motion. Is there a second?
I don't know whether Councillor Bestwick has replied to Mr. Mema's request that he looks at the amended motion, possible amended motion, and decides that that's what he wants to do. So I'm going to
We do have a motion on the floor, it's been seconded.
Yeah.
So if you're going to refer it back to F&E, then we need a seconder for that.
Yeah, well,
So
we
second.
got one.
Okay, so I don't see a seconder. So let's carry on with the motion on the floor. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I think this $30,000, which isn't a chump change, but we've moved motions much more than the amount. Where I'm stuck, not stuck actually, is how we over politicize what's best for the city. I think just recently, we've all driven around town, we've seen semis galore, every hotel's booked up, restaurants back, rest facilities been rented, and the money we all know that this brings into from this one show that's happening right now, the one that Trent's wife's are involved with. So this is an industry that we should be pushing for. This is how we should actually have open arms. It seems like we want a roadblock, and I'm really stuck for the fact that since I've been on council, we've had a pretty much parades for Square One, which is losing up to 60, 100 grand a year. And it seems like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. Let's do what we can, but we'll keep losing money there. Here we know this fills in, this fulfills hotels. We got a new hotel coming, maybe a potential one down the road. This is what we need to do, is bring this industry here, and boom. We've all got friends in the industry, everyone on this table does. We know what it does. And so somehow we gotta make a way. If there's a technicality, which I'm not saying bend the rules or whatever, but if there's a will, there's a way. It doesn't have to be through infill, but we somehow go promote with the tourism people that's here, the ACDEP branch. This is a perfect avenue to get aggressive and say we're open for business. And the people are going to run and say the Nanaimo's not open for business and say, oh, that council's not open for business. Well, that's not fact. I'm open for business. I don't want to be handcuffed and someone think of a reason not to do something. I'm glad that I'm sick and tired of this approach. So we got to make things happen. So if there's a will, there's a way. Let's be creative and get all this money and business into the city. And I'm sorry about that term I just used. But I'm passionate about making this place better. Let's not politicize everything just to debate it. Thank you.
Councillor Kip, followed by Councillor Holman.
On June 3rd, we received a 4-page letter from Mr. Dan Brady from the Hospitality Association requesting that we consider the $30,000 financial. And when the executive, they talked about it, and they talked about the RDN, they talked about referencing the grants on the first page. The second page, they talked about the tweets and the impact of it, and they go on presenting at present Hallmark TV series, Chesapeake Shores, in the midst of filming, they talk about it. Then the financial impacts of filming in Nanaimo, they talk about Godzilla. And I understand that Nanaimo's permits are one of the most expensive in any of the film industries. Our cost for putting this on is one of the most expensive costs, as I know, and I've been told that by the film guys. So location rental includes city permit, about $150,000 for that. They said about $15 million total, $2 million was spent here in Nanaimo with Godzilla. I think the railway got $2 million. On page 4, we received financial information. I don't know, maybe you didn't see it. It came back on June 3rd, and that's the reason this motion came June 6th back to our table, because Councillor Bestick and myself responded. This talks about Hallmark, Baker Sisters, Nature Way, Hallmark, Chesapeake, Godzilla, Superman, Twilight Eclipse, Scourge, Hyundai commercial, Northern Trust commercial, Suzuki commercial, Ford, TV series, Designing Spaces, Weekend Makeover. It goes on and it talks about some Nanaimo local, about $5 million spent. Our investment of $30,000 to help this non-profit organization market our community. Arts gets, the theater gets money. The symphony gets $85,000 a year from Nanaimo every year for professional symphony people that live outside of Nanaimo. Economic development. Our economic development officer, the quote that's in here is basically saying our economic development officer said, a single tweet says more than one small thing. Filming sector brings huge economic benefits. Our own economic development officer said that. And so, tourism, film and photos, the clips, people knew it was 5 seconds in Nanaimo. So I believe this is something we benefit from, we invest from. People, and this is technical jobs. This is high-end things coming. People with skill sets on filming and video coming to here to think they would like to live here. When I hear people say we need a fast ferry to get 20 people here or 100 people here, man, a couple films outdo that one boat trip, eh? And so for me, I want to spend this $30,000 and say, we give it to everybody, like Councillor Bestick says, and the facts come to roost. We got the 4-page. They couldn't send us any more information. Every year they send us information. We hear it at the RDN, we hear it everywhere, and it seems there's a roadblock. And what I said in my email, I want to get it out of the hands of our economic development staff, because I think that's been one of the holdups. And I think because some people's fingerprints are on it, things get held up. So we have this information. How much more do we need? Can we put it up on the screen? What do we need to do? I mean, this is, when you see millions, talk to Mr. Trey from the Hoteliers Association was here. How 6,500 rooms in Nanaimo, a bunch in Parksville, a bunch in Qualicum. It's a regional benefit in Nanaimo. And when they talked about the funding from the minister, about getting the funding for hotel grant, the ministry staff said that funding of local or regional film commissions is the responsibility of local or regional district and the local municipality. So I believe it's our responsibility to invest in the film industry like we invest in theater, like we invest in symphonies, like we charge lacrosse teams, whatever. So it's huge to me. This is just to delay it again after 20 years of delaying it. It's just a ploy. Send it back to a committee.
Thank you, this is great.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to let Councillor Bestwick and the rest of council know the recommended change that Mr. Mema had proposed, and that was that the City of Nanaimo Council directs staff to work with Nanaimo Hospitality Association in establishing a sustainable funding contribution to in-film. So I just wanted you to all be aware of what staff was
They turned that down.
proposing.
I thought they turned it down, and they turned it down. They said it wasn't capable to be used for that.
Mr. Merrick, can you shed some light on that?
So, two comments quickly. We agree with everything you have said as to the impact of it. We agree with you, totally. It's your own rules, it's your own policy that's stopping you. Staff is simply trying to find a way to facilitate this. That's all that motion is about. We are in talks with NHA. After that note, I spoke to NHA this morning and said, look, there's ways we can do this. So are you willing to, if I got mandate from my council to continue talking to you so we can figure this out? We can still go back to the ministry. We are co-signers on the funding, the hotel tax. We are co-signers. We can still make an application to get this as an eligible funding source. There's other things that we're still talking that can make this work, which is why we say we need to solve this once and for all. I can hear your frustration. So all we're asking for is to get a chance to facilitate that this becomes a sustainable way of funding in film. That's all we're trying to do.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Just, I don't understand how the RDN can do something like this and we can't, so I don't know what the bylaws or how they're different. But the question I have is off topic right now, but that'll get there. The coastal invasive species, do we get the money? Do we get the money to control Scottish broom?
Yes.
City of Nanaimo, do we get the money? Because I like to know where they're based. According to the website, it says Courtney.
I don't know.
So, yeah, not to you, but I'm just saying, if we can't, it's not, they're not in Nanaimo, so if we can't give money, and we give money to them based on Courtney, in film, based on Campbell River. Not to staff or anything else, but you know, we have our policies, we say. But when I look at this, when we talk about how come we can't do this, and I've been thinking of organizations that we give money to that aren't based in Nanaimo. If that is our bylaw, coastal invasive species is out of Courtney. They do work in Nanaimo. I'm not saying that they don't deserve the money. That's not my point. My point is getting to the fact that they're not based in Nanaimo, yet we give them money. And I know the RDN, we approved and we gave them 30,000 or whatever we did, 15 here and 30 up there or something. Because I remember they coming to us. And I specifically remember that they're not based out in Nanaimo. So that is something that you can look at. Sure. Because if we can do it for one, I don't understand why we can't do it for another. So that's just my comment. And I support the motion, but I just like to.
Thank you. So, Councillor Thorpe.
Thanks, Chair. So I was going to ask what the wording of the suggested amended motion was, and thank you, Mr. Mema, for explaining that. I guess my hesitation is based on the information that we're getting from senior staff, that our own policy is working against us right now. And I'm hearing Mr. Mema say that he doesn't want to throw up roadblocks. We're not trying to delay or defer or in fact defeat this. He's looking for a creative way of making it happen. As Councillor Yoakum was saying, there's a will, there's a way. So I don't believe that we should go against city policy, even if we've done it inadvertently in other cases. I don't think that makes it right to do it again here. I want to be able to support this. I want to be able to do it in a way that is consistent with city policy. And so I don't know how Councillor Bestwick feels about Mr. Mema's suggested amendment, but it seems to me it's a reasonable approach that might lead to a longer term funding. So I guess that's where I'm stuck right now, and I'd be curious to know, you know, if Councillor Bestwick sees that as a way to move this forward.
You've got other speakers, I don't know.
I do. So, next one, Councillor Brannan. I wonder if I might interject before you speak, as you've spoken once on this subject already. Yeah. Okay. Now, can the councillors that are directors of the RDN board, I know they, Infill came in front of us and they suggested they'd like to do a single ask that would cover the entire region, all the communities and all the regional electoral areas in the region. And I thought it was a great idea, but I thought it was really odd because they never gave us a number. And then they never came back. So we never did give them any money. You're not more.
Staff, we gave them $5,000. I'll be happy to respond to that.
We gave them $5,000.
Yep.
Regionally.
Yep.
Okay. So my next question would be, on this one here, it sure looks to me like in the region of the regional district of Nanaimo, there's a lot of hoteliers that are benefiting from this. I heard 8,000 rooms, I heard 11,000 rooms, and it's $30,000 we're talking about here. If I was a hotelier and somebody said to me, I'm going to give you 2,000 hotel rooms, you just need to kick $4 a night in, and we'll give this Infill outfit some money. I mean, there's your money. 8,000 rooms is $4 a night. But instead, the group is demanding that the city of Nanaimo, the hotel group, is saying, city of Nanaimo must do this. And ignoring it must stop. I find that really odd, that there's this huge benefit to accommodators in the regional district that don't seem to be willing to contribute. I just find that really odd. Councillor Brannan.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that, given what Victor's told us, that he would like to have some time to explore solutions to this. Could we table the motion that's on the floor right now to provide the money, give instructions to Victor to do what his amended motion said, and come back to us and with the hope that the problem's solved and that we can either make a contribution via the hoteliers or have our policy fixed so that we can do it ourselves. But we have to somehow deal with the motion that's currently on the floor, either by tabling or referring or deferring, any host of measures, but we need to get it off the floor so that we can give instructions to our staff to help us solve this problem.
Should we make the motion to table?
Well, I'll try it, okay? I'll make.
Is there a seconder? I'll table and refer it back to staff. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Brannan and seconded by Councillor Thorpe on the motion to table. Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Thorpe,
Councillor Ford has just spoken, so I'll defer to him as long as I can stay behind him.
So the amended motion mentioned the Nanaimo Hospitality Association being approached and that working to somehow figure this out. Well, the letter from Dan Brady is quite specific when the executive of the NHL heard that the in-film funding request had been denied by the city, we encouraged in-film to submit an application to the NHA for $30,000 grant through the Municipal Regional District Tax Program. They tried to approve the application, but the Ministry of Finance said no, they can't do it. They can't do it. It's right here. It says, Ministry staff said that the funding of a local or regional film commission is the responsibility of the local regional district and or the local municipality. So if you can't use the tax funds for in-film, why are we looking at using the tax funds for in-film?
Mr. Member.
Your worship, let's cut through this whole thing. You own the policies, right? Change the policy and let's move on with this.
Or suspend the policy, make a vote, and bring the policy back. And tell staff where to find, just to find them.
Okay, so there's Councillor Besser followed by Councillor Yocum on the motion to table in the first step.
Well, I just would, if I permitted, I'd like to comment on comments that were made. In-film made a request to the regional district in Nanaimo, which included all of the areas that have made financial contributions over the years, or the one ask, as you yourself say, was a good idea, good suggestion. So the money that they asked for, the amount that they asked for was the same amount that Parksville, Qualicum, RDN, Nanaimo, Coombs, whatever. Everybody that had made a contribution in 2016 to whatever that amount was, that's the amount that they were asking that all of the contributors to the RDN contribute. In one ask, so the city would write a check to the RDN, Parksville would write a check to the RDN for the exact same amount, and the RDN would write the check. So that was defeated. That's the amount of money they asked for. If we wish to table this, and the Nanaimo Hospitality Association has made it perfectly clear in writing that the film industry does not qualify for their funds through the MRDT program, period. And they've asked, and they've had their knuckles rattled. So if we want to cut through the chase, if we want to cut through the BS. The fact that we don't have any money in our 2017 budget for such an ask is, to me, why we're finding the policy and the process not to move forward with an ask. And this didn't just come this week. This isn't an ask this week. This is an ask that is weeks and months old. And now we're here in June, July, seemingly thinking we just got this 48 hours ago. If this council's wishes is to table this and not support the ask because they're from out of town, then fine. Table it. Defeat it. Council, do whatever you want. I'm just here to say that I think it would be a huge mistake for our economic situation, that Chesapeake Shores and everything else that they do here that is stealth-like, that's under the radar, that we don't know that they do. That In-Film does with 3 employees on Vancouver Island. And the contribution that it makes to this city. The Chamber of Commerce president told me 11,000 rooms. This isn't anecdotal stuff. So, it's not me saying it. It's about $500,000 in per diems. There's a brand new education program that they wanted to be at VIU, that we turned that away as well. That's going to parking. That Minister Shirley Bond gave her stamp of approval to. So that's fine.
So on a point of order, Your Worship, a motion.
Excuse me.
A motion to table is not debatable.
That's right.
I was
Then
being patient.
let's table this. Let's kill it. and be
That sounds like debate to me, Your Worship. It is not debatable.
You did say you wanted to be formal,
Table.
so she's right.
I'm not running the meeting.
Okay, so, we call a question.
What's the question?
Table.
To table, sorry.
Table with no directions.
Table and
Yes,
refer to staff.
Direction would come in that next motion.
Point of order. February 28th, this was taken to the RDN. We gave $5,000, and then we asked that the RDN staff get a hold of the other municipalities and talk about it.
That's not,
Has that been
is
done?
a debate. That is part of the debate on the motion.
Let's get the tabling question, let's get the tabling question off the
Just fail
table.
the motion, for goodness sakes, it's quicker, just do it.
On the motion to table, all those in favor? Favor. Opposed? So Councillor Hall, Bestwick, Kip, Fuller, and Yocum. Opposed?
I would like to make another motion.
You guys speak for this, Mr. Mayor?
Oh yeah, you're still on the old.
The old motion failed. Ms. Curry.
I was just going to repeat what Councillor Brennan just did, and that's that the original motion is on the floor. Back again.
Correct. The original motion is on the floor. That the city of Nanaimo provide up to $30,000 towards the program in film for 2017. I'm still showing Councillor Fuller and Councillor Hall.
No, I was after Councillor Brennan originally.
On the tabling motion.
Oh, no. Okay, on this, I'll wait then, sorry.
Do you mind if Councillor Yocum goes next?
Yeah, what I was gonna say was just as well with the tabling motion as it did with this one, so.
Sorry, guys.
Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I'm gonna suggest, I hear what Mr. Mem was saying, but also, this is really ridiculous because we're talking, Jim, Mr. Councillor kept us rattle off all the multi-millions that come in the city. So we're bringing personalities into money. I was down at our kids' canoe practice the other night down by the Brecken Marina. There are food trucks galore that are filming in that empty building. I'm observing this with the canoe practice. And it's insane. Food trucks, staff galore. And it went late at night. Sealand or Coke, or whatever this C-SPAN old site, parking there, food trucks galore, people going, business going. I heard at the Chamber of Golf Tour, Mr. Smythe telling me amounts of money this is bringing to Nanaimo. Talking to Mr. Casey, I just happen to be sitting at the table. It's insane. So I do not want to be responsible for being, Nanaimo's not business friendly, because this business will go elsewhere. It's not like they're lining up to come here. We should open the door. I mean, very repetitive. So I would suggest, I do not want to push $5 million away from it. I don't see many people rushing here. So I would like to maybe, the city of Nanaimo provide up to $30,000 towards the program in film, subject to policy amendment that support this. And that way, because I heard our CEO say there's a way, the policy, yeah, you guys make policy, so this adds subject to with a time frame, and then so we're not pushing business away, so they don't think and also the people that are gonna say, oh, the 5 are against policy, they wanna break their own rules. I can just see the lunacy behind all that already, probably already on Facebook somewhere, so on. So I just want to say that way we cover it. I think Councillor Bestick, we okay with it, because at least we put it out there, get the ball rolling, and Phil knows we're open, and then that way we get the policy, what you stated, correct the policy. You said only holds back policy. So subject to blah, 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 blah. There's better wordsmithers in the room than me. Because let's make this happen. Want to sit and politicize this? I'm not going to wear the loss of $5 billion because some of you don't like the people that want this.
You know,
Thank you.
I'm going to
Thank
take
you, Mr. Mayor.
a personal objection to that. I don't have anything against.
I wasn't talking to you. So that was my suggestion, Mr. Mayor.
Look, on a point of personal privilege, I have the right to say I do not need to be criticized for not liking people. I have a clear reason why I've made the motion several times to send it back to Victor to have him resolve the question for us. And I'm not really going to sit here and be criticized twice tonight for personal issues.
So my final comment as of my speaker on the floor is I am not opposed to $5 million plus from this city and then making that business come into this city. We got to open the doors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that staff might try to get this from the hotel tax, but just looking at the Vancouver Island South Film Media Commission, their funding partners, City of Victoria, Greater BC District of Saanich, Oak Bay, Langford, Sooke, Esquimalt, Colwood, Town of Sydney. Nowhere do I see Tourism Victoria, MRDT tax money. These are city funding it. And I do believe that they should have other funding in film because I think they're lacking in funding. But now they have some sponsors. Tourism is not on there, but you know what is on there? Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Where's our Chamber of Commerce stepping up to the plate? Is a question I like to ask. Where's our chamber? How come they're not stepping up? So it's just has nothing to do with us, but I'm just saying some of the people that do it. Where are our hotels? We should be asking, because we know that the MRT tax isn't going to provide this kind of funding. It's great that we can do it. Victoria can't do it. Premier Suites, Pacific Coastal Airlines, National, Marriott, Accent Inn, Zed's Hotel, Harbor Towers, Parkside. These are all individual companies, so obviously they probably tried to go to the hotel and it hasn't worked. I don't see anything that supports the South Island in film that we can't do, and I don't expect staff to pull off miracles to fund or other thing in Victoria. I'm sure Victoria would have figured out how to use their tax money first. Because I could say, hey, that's a good idea, Victoria did it, so we could do it. So I have no reason not to believe Mr. Brady saying that they won't allow it. I have no reason not to believe them. Because I don't see us in the South film industry, their website saying that they're sponsored. They're not. It's all the cities, and it's all the districts, and it's all the towns that are paying for this. So let's just get this over with. Let's figure out where we can do this and give them the money. The money was earmarked from NEDC, and we took that money away. So we should put it back somewhere. Thanks.
So, Councillor Thornton.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I would like to be able to support this because I do believe in the benefits. I know the benefits that InFilm brings to this community, but I cannot support the motion as it stands simply because it goes against our current city policy. And I was hoping that by tabling, we would give Mr. Mema a chance to do something creative and find a way forward. But that didn't happen. I accept that. But I cannot vote for something that goes against our existing city policy. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Passford.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum had an amendment that we haven't discussed that would be subject to, so the motion as we know it, subject to an amended policy to permit funding for this intake, or however it was worded. So my question to Councillor Thorpe would be then, fundamentally, it's not really different than sending it back to staff to find a way to make it work with a policy that's the same thing. Would you be supportive then?
I would be supportive although I would want to ask Mr. Mema's opinion, but it sounds good to me. Is that coming forward as an amendment?
Were the movers and seconders of the motion, or is it been moved?
It has been moved and seconded, and Councillor Bestwick, it was moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Kim.
So I would certainly support the motion as amended by Councillor Yocum.
And would there be agreement from the seconder?
Councillor Kim?
Can I hear the amendment?
That the City of Nanaimo provide up to $30,000 towards the program in film for 2017, subject to an amendment to the City of Nanaimo policy that permits such funding.
Councillor Thorpe?
And then I was going to ask Mr. Mena his opinion on that.
So my professional opinion on this is council decides whatever council wants to do. Setting yourselves a precedent where you can always change the policies to fit whatever you want to do. The question then is, why do you need policies? Maybe you don't need them. Let's just go on and do whatever we want. But council has the right to change policy, and if that's the will of council, that's the will of council.
Councillor Yocum?
Thank you. Just quickly, I totally respect and hear that, but as things evolve and opportunities arise, sometimes you have no choice. This is an opportunity. Just like some of us felt like there was a policy that garbage cans can't weigh this much, now they're going to be double. We changed policy. So you change with the times. This, to me, this is a positive change. It isn't just flexing the rules because all of a sudden, yeah, we'll just sell this on a whim. This is something that benefits the city, the merchants, the hotels, the restaurants, laborers, and everyone involved in the industry. Of $5+ million that Jim has on that email that we got June 3rd. So that's why I know what you're saying, but sometimes you got to change with the times that benefit the people and benefit the city. Thank you.
I just wanted to say for the record that I asked the Economic Development Officer whether or not there had been a commitment this year by the NEDC to fund infill. She advises me that there had been no commitment. And that was confirmed. That was confirmed by the former president of NEDC that there had been no commitment. The next thing was that we're about to go into a process with economic development where we're going to determine what areas of focus Nanaimo wants to focus on. We're going to try and get the brightest of business leaders in the community. They've got all kinds of that already provide significant employment and economic generation in the city. I believe we should wait to put to determine what our areas are going to be that we as a community are going to focus on. There's lots of things we can focus on. We can focus on ecotourism. We can focus on film and movie production. We can focus on forestry. We can focus on manufacturing. We need to determine what those are going to be, and we can't do it in an ad hoc basis. I say wait until, before we make any major commitment to film in Nanaimo, we wait until the determination's been made by the Strategic Advisory Committee that will report to council hopefully by the end of the year. As far as the contributions from Victoria, you rattled off a number of the hoteliers who contributed. If there's 8,000 rooms that are going to come to the hoteliers, chip in $4 a room night, there's your $32,000. They see the logic in contributing to their film board down in Victoria. I don't know why our hoteliers don't. I can't vote in favor. We call the question.
We spent $100 million building the convention center to fill hotel rooms in Nanaimo. That's one of the reasons for event center. We spent almost $100 million to put people in hotel rooms, and now they've been working with the film industry and giving them deals and going to them. Now it's something to hold on to. I mean, we spent millions on trying to put people in hotel rooms, and we got some people that are trying to work for our community. We're not willing to fund them.
I'm going to call a question. Councillor Fuller?
Yeah. We talk about setting precedents. That's been set ages ago. We're constantly $5,000 here, $5,000 there. We're constantly making those decisions against policy. Constantly. This is a benefit of $14 million to the region for $30,000 investment. Makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. NEDC did not have a commitment in it. I imagine they didn't have a commitment to much of anything at the time. They claimed they did do it. Yes, we did. We are in the process of the new NEDC. I get all of that, but by the time those decisions are made, this will have passed and we may have lost a huge opportunity. So I am going to support the motion just for the opportunity. I like the idea of a $30,000 investment for a $14 million return, even if part of that return goes to bonus.
Last speaker.
Thanks, Chair, I'm sorry. I said might be inclined to support the amended motion subject to Mr. Mema's comments, and I need to clarify Mr. Mema's comments. I would be supportive that Mr. Mema is telling me that there is a way of working within city policy to make this happen. But I thought I maybe heard you say, basically, we're ignoring city policy, and if we choose to do that, we choose to do that. So could I get you to restate your thought? Is there a way of making this happen under the amended motion that you think there is a creative way of doing this within city policy, or would we be in fact be choosing to ignore policy?
So city policy is what it is. So what I thought I'm hearing the motion to say is that you are changing city policy to accommodate this. I may have misunderstood.
That's the intent, to make this opportunity arise.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to say what Mr. Mema said, and that was the motion was to amend the City of Nanaimo policy.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to call a question. Make sure that we keep our hands in the air so that the clerks can record it. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? John Mayor McKay opposed. Motion's defended.
I would just like to know if Mr. Mema could bring to us or to the Finance and Audit Committee some wording now for this amended motion so that we are not like if we had people from Seashell that came over and wanted money from us for something, or Campbell River or whatever, so that we are not, so that we have some parameters around this funding out of Nanaimo boundaries. Is there anything you can bring to us that can at least, after today, set those parameters?
So, Your Worship, I think we'll simply amend the policy, and
what will the policy say to be amended?
Just removes the location.
Yes, so what I'm wondering is if you would put your mind to amending it in such a way that there is discretion for us to do that, but on using some certain criteria, just so that not everybody outside of the city limits can show up with an expectation that that whole issue of where your business is. If you could put your mind to that, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next item. Councillor Fuller, neighborhood developments.
There it is. Yes, this is the motion. And the motion would be that, and it was great because in bringing this forward as a notice of motion, Mr. Lindsay actually got in touch with me and had come up with some wording he thought I might like. And I looked at it and it encompassed everything. So we actually had that discussion and it was great. So the motion is to direct staff to commence a review of the existing innovative housing for neighborhoods, triplex and quadruplex infill design guidelines, with consideration given to adding guidelines for other forms of infill housing. And 2, direct that the associated consultation with community include neighborhood associations. And 3, that council not support further development variance applications for detached suites until such time that the review of the guidelines is completed and considered by council. And I'd like to speak to that.
Okay, can you get a seconder?
I guess.
Seconded by Councillor Kent. Thank you.
So the idea is to broaden our creating housing. Like, there's been a lot of stuff about micro housing lately. You know, 250 square feet. But I was thinking,
Excuse me just 1 second. This is no longer a notice of motion, or is it?
No.
Notice of motion?
No, it's under other business now.
Well, it said bring forward a motion, is it right? Oh, the June 19th? Oh, you said that, okay, I'm confused.
It's,
My annotated says notice of motion.
no,
um,
that was last.
no, it's under other business, your worship.
Under other business. Sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, no, it's okay. There's been a couple of mistakes on your annotated version. So yeah. So one of the things that came to mind for me was that last small lot thing that wanted to put in a secondary suite or a carriage house. We voted it down. But the person that voted it down would have been perfectly fine had it been a smaller carriage house, like a micro house. They would have been fine with going in that. But what I've been thinking about before was, we talked about one secondary suite, one detached house being on a property single family. Why not 2? The 1 equals 960. Why not 2 400? Or 3 250 or 300? So I think by reviewing this guidelines, the guidelines for a triplex project that's infill, that will allow us to get some broader perspective and help create more affordable housing. It's all part of that affordable housing strategy, like the secondary suites and so on and so forth. So I think this would be a perfect one. It was created in 1997. That's 20 years. So,
Councillor Sean.
Thank you. I can support 1 and 2. You can't support 3 of it. Development, we can't stop anybody because, you know what, this guy could be on 50 acres and he decides to put his house right at the tip of the corner and he needs a variance because he wants to put it, I think you encompass what you need to do with 1 and 2. But for us to stop hearing development permits, I think that doesn't seem to make any sense on why we would do that, because there's other variants that could happen. That guy can conform to having a detached suite, but maybe he wants his roof pitched differently or something, and that's still a development variance permit, right? Maybe he needs a retaining wall for it. That's still a development variance permit. It's not actually the size. He could have a 200 square foot cottage, but so I can't support that.
So we do it.
Okay, so hang on a second. Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I just wanted to add that if council was to pass a motion that they not be in support of development variance permit applications for any reason, it doesn't mean that we would turn people away at the counter who want to make those applications. In those situations for council's policy, we would advise that council's currently not supportive of applications for reason X. But if a person wanted to make an application and bring it forward, they could. We would remind council at the time that they had a policy, and council would have to consider and weigh that policy. But at the end of the day, we can never stop someone from their right of making it.
But the motion says not support.
It would be a council policy that would not be supportive of those applications, but it doesn't mean you may not have applications that still end up at your table.
So would the mover like to run the Sariano?
Yeah.
Okay. Seconder okay with that? Okay. So on the first one, to direct staff to commence a review of the existing innovative housing for neighborhoods, triplex and quadruplex infill design guidelines, with consideration given to adding guidelines to other forms of infill housing. Any further discussion on that? Call the question, and all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're doing the first bullet.
In seriatim,
Yes.
right, okay, I'm in favor.
So it passes. Next one, direct that the associated consultation with the community include neighborhood associations. Any discussion on that one? Councilor Westman.
So, consultation with neighborhood associations, is that when there may be an application in that neighborhood, or is that just a broader, whatever, one-time or two-time consultation about the proposed changes to the innovative housing for neighborhoods, triplex? So it seems to me it could be very burdensome, frankly, if these applications are going to require that the consulted how, when, where, how many times, and just the neighborhood that this might happen in this week or this month or next month. So just trying to think of being the devil's advocate. Do we have an association, an umbrella group of neighborhood associations that you would take it to that place and say, now you guys disseminate this information to your neighborhood associations so that it's being heard through them, through us, from us. But I can just see it becoming quite overwhelming potentially. Maybe not, I could be totally wrong. Just a question.
I see this tied directly to the first part, where the redesign of the infill comes forward, and you take that to the neighborhood associations for input. We'll always have the ability, whenever something goes out, it goes out to the neighborhood association regardless for variances on these developments. So that's always there, and once we get the new guidelines in, we may actually be seeing less of these variances coming to council. So I see those two working in tandem with each other.
So if I've got it, you're suggesting that they go to the umbrella organization?
Well, when we design, we're gonna redesign the whole triplex, quadruplex infill. So that needs to get out to the neighborhood associations for input, community input. So we approach the neighborhood associations, which are the direct means of contacting their individual neighborhoods. We go out, we bring the proposed guidelines to them, ask them for input, what they'd like to see, what they wouldn't like to see. It's like going out and getting any consultation on the waterfront walkway. We have no idea what we want, but we want people to come and give their input. So we would want that input on this, and because infill design directly impacts neighborhoods, we'd like their input on it. And then with any variance permit, it's like that one that came out, Bracken Hill spoke on the other. Those variances go to the neighborhood association anyway. So once once the guidelines are developed, people are still going to ask for variances. And those variances will go to the individual neighborhoods that those variances are in. That's just a given. But we get their input on the guidelines themselves. Just like we did with the original one, I imagine. Like I said, I wasn't around, but I would imagine we connected with the community for their input, and this is a means of doing it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That council not support further development various applications for detached suites until such time that the review of the guidelines has been completed and considered by council. I've got a question for the mover, and that is, what do you consider to be a detached suite, other than a carriage house?
That would be pretty much it right now. But I'm perfectly willing to even vote against that part myself, because, as I said, those variances come to council and they go to the neighborhoods anyway. So we can turn them down to council to come before us. I recognize it'd be easier if they didn't come before us, we didn't have to do it, but I'm willing to,
Well, my question was actually, we're just looking for your definition of detached suites, but it also goes on to say further develop, that council will not support further development variance applications. If a carriage suite is coming forth on a piece of property that requires no variance, this wouldn't apply.
yeah, no, perfect. If it doesn't require a variance, we don't even see it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Besser.
Thank you. Just a question to staff. How long before we anticipate the review of the guidelines has been completed and considered by council? Do we have any indicator on when that may happen?
Through your worship, at this point, staff would estimate that it would be in our 2018 work plan.
Thank you. So that's 6 to 9 to 12 months. So that's a long time that council not support further DB applications for detached suites.
And election year.
So I'm just not, I'm not convinced that that's a good thing to do right now.
So I've got Councilor Brennan.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point brought up by Councillor Bestwick. The amount of time, that's just too long to put a stall on anything that affects the development of housing that's affordable. And so I can't support this, and I'm not really sure what it means when it says that we're sort of passing a motion that we don't support any further development variance applications. I think, one, we have to be able to give it a fair, have an open mind. Is that right or wrong?
Your worship, the open mind test comes to council and their and you know, the need to keep an open mind when you're going into a public hearing process. That same test doesn't apply for variances. So like I mentioned earlier, if council had a policy that they didn't support development variance permits at this time for any reason, we would simply inform applicants of that, and if they made an application, we would remind council of their policy when they came forward to the table. Council on that given time could weigh that policy and decide whether to comply with it
Right.
or hold to that or not.
So my expectation is that this would not really, wouldn't really help us at all, because we would be, you know, we'd see a good application that hit all the right bells and whistles and tacked on all four corners, and I don't know, we'd be somewhat constricted by having already basically set a policy for ourselves in our decision making that we weren't going to approve them. So I'm not going to tie my hands or the hands of another council on this. But I mean, the two we've already passed are good. I think they're probably adequate. This policy development is probably a little stronger than we wanted to use.
Councilor Floyd.
I'm quite fine with that. Like I said, this just talks about variances. So, you know, as I say, we look at variances all the time. So if in the event they do come to us, we can always turn them down. Again, so, yeah. But this would have just prevented those variance requests, not the carriage houses themselves. I'm fine with it. I'm actually likely going to vote against that.
Okay, so if I could, then we'll just call the question. And all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The motion is defeated. Okay, the next item is under delegations, and it's not related to report to council. The first speaker is Mr. Dan McGowan regarding revision of highway standards to reduce highway lane widths.
I think this evening has been a pretty long one with regards to priorities associated with development of roads. I'll try and keep this fairly brief. A few months ago, the DNVIA, which is now defunct, presented to this council with a plan for the redevelopment of the Nickel Street Terminal Corridor. I'm sure you all recall that. You all approved it, and it was spoken well of by delegations at the time. It seemed to have general, in terms of its planning process, it had a large amount of input and was highly favored by the people involved in the planning process. I happen to be one of them. And I wanted to, I probably didn't title this terribly well, given the thrust of the presentation, but I really wanted to bring this back towards council at a time where I think there's opportunity to get the provincial government moving towards changing the, I guess, the configuration of the highway in the Nickel Terminal Corridor. And I understood that the ask from the NVIA at the time was to approach the provincial government to allow changes to that highway in that section. As I've been informed recently, that hasn't been configured. That little bit of a task hasn't been completed. It was to go to the planning department for review of the report and then a recommendation, and hopefully that's been done. So I'd like to put it back and call some attention to that particular strategy that's put forward and approved, and hopefully get some movement towards that objective.
Okay. Questions? Councilor Besser.
Thank you, son. Thanks, Dan, for coming. Since the Terminal Nickel Street Reimagined Committee was made up of multiple stakeholders, chaired by Gary Hollis. And I sat on that, Councilor Brent sat on that. I could be wrong. I don't recall the NDIA specifically sitting on that committee, but there might have been NDIA members who sat on that city because of where they live, work, and life. To the degree that the outcome, there was many outcomes, and there was many public engagements and events that went on. And so as in terms of the outcomes, to direct this council to make a request of Ministry of Transportation or whoever Ministry of Transportation was at the table, they had a staffer at the table. I would have to get staff's reminder of what the outcomes and next steps were directed or not to proceed or not to proceed with. And I think, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I would like to
re-energize.
So, I don't know. I would be just guessing if I said what was supposed to happen that hasn't, or is it has happened or whatever. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'd like to get an update on its status, if that's fair.
I think that's fair. I think that's kind of where I'm at too.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions for the delegation? Councilor Kevin.
There's a number of committees now, Public Works and Engineering, there's a Community Planning and Development. Where do you think it would arrive to be re-energized? Where do you think would be a good committee for that would be?
Well, the planning committee happens to be the one
We're
I'm
on.
on.
Yeah.
We're on. And I think that it's been kind of studied fairly thoroughly as a plan. And as a plan, it represents a fairly good approach as a plan. And in its completeness, it kind of works. It's all involved. I don't know if it needs a review from the committee, but it was requested that staff review it, and a report was expected, but it was a timeline late.
Okay, follow-up, so maybe this is this level here that we have to revitalize that, but it's interesting to me, is that so, see, for me, a plan is something that is vision, drawn, costed. That's a plan. This is still in a vision stage, I believe. There's no costing attached to it. I don't believe there's any costing attached to it. It was just another vision, right, that's concerned me sometimes. So what we have to do now, we have a vision, we probably have to cost it and find out what it would cost to create that environment. Like, I really love the fact that the Nickel was closed that week and the Hill was closed and stuff going on. The public really enjoyed that, but I think there has to be a price attached to what that work would take, what it would benefit as increasing tax values and things like that, or improving that area. And, the left-hand turn lanes and those type of things for accessing two directions on the highway is important for commerce. And that was one of the planned things, is to improve that area by making it accessible for commerce. So I think this council has to look at sending a request to staff to update us on that plan, where it's at and what are the next steps. So I think that would be.
I believe the council has already directed staff to.
Oh, have we?
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Any other questions for the delegation? Councilor Brennan.
Now to question number 6, thank you for bringing this up and reminding us, because when I look at it, it says that the fear that not just the participants, but people who participated by engaging in the process, citizens, that their biggest fear was that council would do nothing. So I think that, we probably needed a reminder.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to receive the delegation? So moved by Councilor Bessemer, seconded by Councilor King. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councilor Bessemer, do you have a subsequent motion?
I would just move that we direct staff to provide a status update on the Terminal Nicole Street Reimagined Initiative.
Thank you. And is there a seconder?
Should we defer that to a committee?
No. Why?
It's already in there. They're supposed to. Seconded by Councilor Kevin. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next one is Mr. Craig Evans and Mr. Chris Brown. Growing opportunities.
Craig, I have to go to the washroom real quick.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Craig Evans. I've been farming for almost 3 years on a parcel of land in Harewood, a very unique parcel. If we could cue up the video.
5-acre farm at 933 Park Avenue is one of the last intact pieces of the historic Harewood 5-acre parcels. For the last 3 years, 2 local nonprofit organizations, Growing Opportunities and Nanaimo Food Share, have worked together to operate an organic demonstration farm using the property as an education center, therapeutic space, and source of local food. local employability skills training programs, including VIU's West program for students with developmental and cognitive disabilities, and FoodShare's Homegrown program for youth with multiple barriers to employment, use the farm as a training site. Growing Opportunities sells the produce at local farm markets. There are also seed trials to grow and select seeds that suit the local climate and to protect biodiversity and heritage seed. This farm is historically significant. Harewood was the first planned agricultural community in British Columbia. The land of Wakasaya, as it was originally known, was a hunting ground for the Snuneymuxw First Nation. It was granted to the Hudson's Bay Company and then purchased by the Vancouver Coal Mining and Land Company in 1862. In 1888, Samuel Robbins, the company's superintendent, started leasing 5-acre parcels to miners and their families. Robbins saw the need to provide his workers with an opportunity to lease to purchase farmland. He divided up the land of Wakasaya into 5-acre lots and provided them under 21-year leases to his workers on the condition that a portion of the land was cleared and fenced for food cultivation. After 10 years, the workers had an option to purchase the land. Harewood became the breadbasket for the Nanaimo community and area mines. Robbins was also responsible for the creation of Bowen Park and Robbins Park. The farm is ecologically significant. It includes a wetland and stream that is a tributary to the Chase River, a salmon-bearing river. It is also a significant green space in the neighborhood and has been identified as an open space in the Harewood Community Plan and part of a network of green space centered around the stream. The plan illustrates how these elements integrate to form a coherent, rational, efficient, and more complete neighborhood that achieves the overall goals and objectives of the Harewood Neighborhood Plan, protects the remaining natural assets, preserves some of the remnant farmland, and creates a more sustainable urban community. This area is being rapidly developed with dense single and multi-family housing. The time to implement this part of the Harewood Community Plan is now. We would like to see this historic farm purchased and held in trust by the community in perpetuity as an educational farm and community green space. We want to share this vision and are inviting the community to come and tour the farm and get involved in production and planning for its future. For more information, contact growingopportunities@gmail.com or call 250-713-3374.
Great. So I just want to acknowledge Paul Matthews who made that video. This is the community reaching out to the city. So my name is Chris Brown. I'm an organic farmer, entrepreneur in Axmiston, Nanaimo, and a board member of Growing Opportunities. And my biggest interest, one of my interests in restoring agricultural and agroenvironment is cultivating and encouraging the next generation of farmers. So we see this unique active farm in the Harewood neighborhood, surrounded by 6 or 7 schools, and many teachers of these schools have expressed interest in bringing their classes to be involved in farming and participate. So we think that as an active farm and the curriculum changing in schools to include more skills training and education is an important site to return.
And we're here tonight just basically to invite members of council to come visit the farm. We're engaging the community in a discussion on what their vision for the piece of parcel is. The parcel has been identified as a potential for open space, and it's on the priorities list for purchase for parkland and protection of the wetland area. And so we'd like you first to just come out and visit and see what's going on there, walk the property, and just engage with us. And we'll have a number of open houses and a number of events over the summer. You're welcome to come down and just sort of come to the table with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Yocum.
Thank you. Comment and a question I have during the awesome Phil, good work, Paul, as usual, is the 4th house down there was a lunatic lurking through the bushes. Did you see that?
Yes.
Did you see that guy lurking in the trees? I'm just kidding, that's my brother Doug's house. So, Anyways, and he was, the serious question I would have is, I heard in a film about, or a priorities list, whoever owns it, what's the asking price?
Well, it isn't for sale at this time.
Oh.
And so we're working with the present owner of the property. He's had of course, it's hard to stop people from knocking on his doors, looking to purchase it. And he's turned down all offers. We're working with him just to show him that there is community interest in having it maintained as a working farm.
Yeah.
The property has farm status. They're in their early 70s, and so they're at a stage where it's getting harder and harder to maintain farm status. And so we would figure, we have to pay developer prices. It could be 1.1, 1.5 million for 5 acres.
Well, that's just a wrap up, Jerry. That's if. Who's to say that it would get rezoned? So you may not have to.
Yeah.
You bet.
What's that? Because farmers, anyway, don't get too far into that conversation.
Thank you.
Is it zoned right now as a green space or that's just proposed?
I think it's RS1. It's residential, smaller house. It's the OCP designation, I think, and some green spaces.
Councillor Fuller.
There you go, rezone. We got a public hearing and everything.
Yeah, we're pushing up right now to more for all sorts of community interaction. Because this could be a multiple of the schools, but
Yeah, recognizing the bias of the users that are using it right now. Craig with VIU and Chris.
Well,
I know, they're great programs. I
but
love
just to speak to that,
Just
the
kidding.
majority of farmers in Canada are going to retire in the next 15
Yeah,
years.
I know.
It's a crisis right now.
Totally agree.
So this is a unique space because it's really
Totally.
Yeah, and we're very fortunate. We've been receiving funding to hire students each summer. Right now, there's 4 students employed with autism, and a supervisor. There's 2 masters of community planning students employed at VIU to help with the community engagement process.
and I'm actually volunteer.
Yeah, I should have actually said that managers.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Trying to bring the humor in.
Thanks for your effort.
That's cool.
Yeah, and anytime you just want to contact us and say you have an hour, half an hour, or something to come down, please feel free to do so. And we will send you official notices when we have the date set for community opens.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Very cool.
I see no further questions. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Motion to receive delegation
Second.
by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Holmes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, final item, question period.
How many arena boards for speed does the city own?
No idea.
Well, can't you suggest putting one on Ross Road? It's been talked about, and it sounds like it takes direction of the council to do it. Because the city does own some, maybe small ones that bolt to street lamps and big ones that sit on 2 wheels, and I believe you'll find the city owns some.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Dorothy Helton, Nanaimo. I noticed that it just says that it's just whatever was on the agenda for questions. Would you indulge me? It's just a procedural question, just for my information.
About something that happened this evening?
Oh, no. No,
Perhaps you could...
I'd say yes, it happened tonight, I don't want to answer it.
Perhaps you can go offline with the clerk, if it's a procedural question.
okay, sure.
Spit it
out.
Any other questions?
The mayor's telling me I can't, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
No, not